Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel and welcome to TechStrong TV. It's Monday, start of another great week, and it's July. So it's Monday, July 6th. Welcome. Hope you're all well, safe, strong, and being real productive in work. We've got a great Monday show for you, chock full of a lot of tech news, interviews, information, and hopefully entertainment. We also want to announce we've got a bunch of stuff coming up, announcements this week. One will be tomorrow, and it's big news around Digital Anarchist. You know, Digital Anarchist is our video brand, basically, here at MediaOps.com or at MediaOps. And, you know, we have DevOps.com and Security Boulevard and Container Journal. Well, Digital Anarchist is the media brand platform that we have it on. And we've been working for months trying to pull together and make it easier for people to use our video. I mean, we have, I think it's well over 2,000 videos that we've amassed over the years here at Media Ops. And we're going to be launching, well, we're going to make a big announcement tomorrow on around Digital Anarchist. You'll see that coming. We're also going to be announcing several new serial or series that we're going to be streaming here on TechStrong TV as well as out on Digital Anarchist. All three of them I think are really great. We're also going to be announcing a bunch of stuff around Media Ops, and there's more in the works. So lots of exciting news about us rather than the whole industry, but I think it'll be interesting for you all to hear, and stay tuned tomorrow for that. Let's focus on today, though. Right? It's Monday. We've got a full week ahead of us. I've got some good stuff today. Number one, I had a chance to sit down with my friend Dan Garfield over at CodeFresh. CodeFresh just announced another $27 million in funding. That brings them to somewhere near like $48 million in funding total. And they are really, you know, the whole CI/CD market is happening, right? We're seeing Jenkins and solutions of that era kind of give way to refreshes, things like Jenkins X or Spinnaker or CodeFresh or GitLab or Digital AI. I mean, there's no lack of JFrog pipelines. There's no lack of CI/CD, Circle CI, of course, another one. GitHub. There's a lot of CI/CD solutions out there, and a lot of them are built from the ground up to take advantage of things like Kubernetes and cloud native and this kind of stuff. CodeFresh is one of them. They've really caught on. I speak to Dan usually I used to speak to him. We used to go to all the conferences, but we don't go much anymore. But I had a chance to catch up with Dan. He's going to tell us all about what's happening at CodeFresh. After that, I have a good conversation with Juan Acino from NCipher. NCipher recently announced a partnership with the HashiCorp folks on Vault around secrets and security for security secrets, encrypting secrets and so forth. So a good, if that's something you're interested in, check that one out. It's a good interview. And then also in the security vein, I'm happy I did an interview with Jen Miller Osborne over at Palo Alto's Unit 42 threat research team. And they came across, a bad character who was putting up Docker images on the Docker registry and on Docker Hub, and the images had similar names to very popular images and containers that a lot of people use, and they contained the same payload plus a little bit of malware. And we're going to hear from Jen how the Unit 42 team found this, and what you can do to make sure you're safe, and what you can do going forward to avoid stuff like that. So that's a really good interview. Check that out. Then we're going to go into the vaults, back to TechStrong Con again, and staying with our Palo Alto theme, we're actually going to have Matt Chiotti of Palo Alto. He's their VP Cloud Security. I think he actually runs the Unit 42 testing there. And but this isn't about that. This is Matt's presentation at TechStrong Con, and it's the opportunity zone. 3 unique opportunities you can take to lead. Time to reflect, time to experiment, time to transform. And so it was a good session by Matt. I think you'll like it. We'll check that out. I'll then be back with the news, after which we'll turn things over to the one and only Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. Charlene has 2 good interviews today. One is with Spandan Mahapatra, CTO, High-Tech Business Unit at Tata Consultancy, large Indian service integrator and consulting business. And then Charlene also interviews Dominic Williams, President and Chief Scientist at Definity. Good stuff there. Then we'll be back with a analyst corner, and I think we actually have 2 analyst corners for you today, dueling analyst corners. One is with, of course, Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group, and one is with Accelerated Strategies Group's principal analyst, Sanjeev Sharma. And so they're both good. You don't want to miss them. And then I'll be back to close things out. Sounds like it's a great way to start your Monday. We're going to take a quick break now for a commercial and be right back.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
Hey, everyone. As I said at the top of the show, the CI/CD space is really come alive, basically because I think the first generation CI/CD tools are coming to end of life or in need of being refreshed, and that also creates opportunity for new entrants into the game. So, and we see this even at like the CDF, the CD Foundation, out of Linux Foundation. We have a lot of players out here. You have the Spinnaker. You have Spinnaker and the companies associated with it. You have Circle CI, you have CodeFresh, you have GitHub, GitLab. You have CloudBees with Jenkins X and CloudBees, the enterprise product itself. And there's more. There's Digital AI, the folks, who put together rising out of CollabNet, Zibia, and a few other companies. There's no lack of the Atlassian folks. There's no lack of entrance into the CI/CD space. CodeFresh has really kind of carved out a place in this market. They do work natively with Kubernetes. They are built for today's environments. And you know what? They just raised another $27 million, which will go heavily into engineering as they continue to build it out. We had a chance to talk to my friend Dan Garfield about it. And, Dan runs product there. He's a great guy to talk to. Let's now go to our interview with Dan Garfield.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this segment of TechStrong TV. I'm actually joined by my friend Dan Garfield of CodeFresh. One of the crappy things about COVID is I used to spend my weeks, days, months traveling around the world to DevOps or cloud native or security conferences, meeting with all of my friends out there. Dan is always a steady guy who's on our show, on our conference circuit pretty regularly. But as a result of all this, Dan, we probably haven't spoken, I'm going to guess maybe the last DevOps Jenkins World, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yes. I've actually had to take to actually calling people on the phone that I usually see at conferences just to see how they're doing.
Yeah, man. It's crazy. But hey, welcome and thanks for joining us. It's pleasure to see your smiling face out here, man. I assume all has been well during these crazy times?
Well, I wouldn't say that necessarily everything's always well during crazy times, but I will say that CodeFresh is doing well, and that's something very happy to be about. Of course, today we announced that we've raised an additional $27 million in funding. So today's very good and very exciting for us and for our customers and users and community.
That's fantastic, man. Congratulations. So, two best days of owning a boat: the day you buy it, the day you sell it. Some of the best days of being involved in a startup is the days you raise money and the days you have a liquidity event. So good for you, man. Dan, just so our audience is made up of DevOps people, cloud native, digital transformation, cyber. Not everyone may be familiar with CodeFresh already. So why don't we give them a little background on CodeFresh?
Yeah, so CodeFresh is a CI/CD platform, continuous integration, continuous delivery. And the thing that has really set us apart is that we've been built on and for Kubernetes from the very beginning. So the very beginning of our product was really built around the idea of what DevOps look like when you're using containers? What does it look like when you're using microservices? And it's really just the perfect time for us, because not only is Kubernetes just incredibly ascendant, but at the same time, we're really looking at the end of life of Jenkins. And the question is, okay, what's the next platform? What should we be using? And so that's really fueling a lot of user growth and a lot of excitement from our customers and user base that are saying, hey, look, there's a modern platform that helps us deliver software faster. It's easier to use. It's more straightforward. We have a lot more visibility into what's going on because of the integrations into Kubernetes. And so that's kind of where we're coming from. And it's really focused on how do we make engineering teams more effective? How do we help you avoid downtime and integrate it with the best in class tools, not do kind of a monolithic play where everything's a single platform. Instead, we say, look, we're really good at this thing, and we're going to integrate with all of the tools around it. So you can choose the Git provider you want, choose the cloud provider you want, choose the testing tools, the logging provider, all of those things. We're just going to integrate and be agnostic about your other tool choices. So you can do a best in breed choice rather than an all-in-one choice that maybe is sort of a one-size-fits-all sort of vendor locked-in solution.
Yep, that's fantastic stuff. And you're right. Dan, we're at a real, everything you just said superimposed on the state of the world right now with COVID and economics and everything involved with that is, it's these choppy waters where new leaders emerge, where new ways of doing things emerge, where we see new trends. It's almost, like a boundary point, kind of like when the meteor hits, right? I forgot what they call that boundary, not the TMZ. Whatever, there's that boundary point where, the dinosaurs end.
Yeah, the blast radius.
Right, and and then you've got your age of mammals starts, and you can actually see it in geology. This whole COVID thing may wind up being that boundary kind of extinction point.
I suspect that when you started Digital Anarchists, that you didn't quite understand what that word could possibly even mean.
No, well, I made up.
And here we are.
I made up the definition for it, but I did think that it was out with the old and in with the new, but I had no idea what, really how in with the new it is. So, you're riding these trends of, number one, Kubernetes ascendance, right? Number two, CI/CD in general is really becoming a dominant form of deploying software and not just deploying, right? But just the whole way the software factory works. And I don't mean just to the point of deployment. I mean, post-deployment and feedback loops and redeployment and iterate. So you've got that. You've got the Kubernetes thing. Through this COVID thing, someone else not much smarter than I said this quote, and I'm going to screw it up, but we've seen 2 years worth of cloud transformation take place in the last 2 months. Right? Companies who had plans of doing things over the next 2 years have been forced to do it right now. So, man, I hope you got a really good valuation.
We were very happy with our valuations, very strong and much larger than previous.
No, I say it in half jest though, but what were you going to say?
Well, so actually, I almost think we have a sort of golden spike moment happening right now where for a long time, Git was the ascendant technology, and it was, wow, we can actually handle developing software at scale, and we have this version control system that's going to allow us all to do it. So that sort of ascended and became standard and became the norm. And at the same time, we have this infrastructure component on the other side driving microservices and infrastructure as code and that kind of thing. And where do those two technologies meet? They meet in the middle where CI/CD actually takes that version control, turns it into something that you can actually apply as code to your infrastructure. So that final piece of the puzzle, it's what's powering this massive increase in developer productivity and in reliability of software. And it does play into COVID. COVID is a huge accelerant. I wrote an article for Forbes just a few weeks ago about living in a post-crisis world. What does DevOps look like in a post-crisis world? Because that's what we're in, or rather, we're still in crisis world and we're moving into post-crisis world, or continue.
I hope. I live in Florida. We're in crisis mode.
Yeah, that's right. And what that means, really concretely, is that flexibility and being agile, and agile not in the 1990s sense, but now in a 2020 sense, that is key. And so we've seen from our customers, we have customers who are in online gaming, and boy, they have had to deal with an enormous increase in demand. So the flexibility of having a platform that allows them to do what they need to do, that's really critical. But we also have customers who are in retail, and that's a whole different ballgame. They have to have the flexibility to pull things back. And so what you have is a huge sensitivity to social change influencing the demand for your services, and the need to be able to scale up and scale down and adjust and have people work remotely and have people change the way they're working. So having this platform where everybody comes together, really it comes to DevOps, right? DevOps is more critical than ever, and there's just no turning back. It's only going to be more important in 10 years than it is today. There's no way.
Oh, I agree. I think what we're seeing with we were kidding around talking about this whole COVID, not that you ever want to kid about this, but, about 2 years of cloud transformation in 2 months. What we're really seeing is also sort of the widening of the gap, if you will, between, you want to call it high performing IT, you want to call it DevOps enabled IT, or, organizations that are doing CI/CD and so forth, versus kind of less agile or lean kind of ways of running. And so the rich get rich, the poor get poorer, right? The rich get richer. And I think that's what we're seeing. I think when and if we get to the other side of this thing, and I'm confident we will, you're going to see just this huge gap between companies that are kind of leaned into this versus companies that might have, called up in a fetal position and try to wait it out. And a lot of those companies that try to wait it out may not make it through, actually. So I agree with you. Dan, I just got to close the loop on the story, though. So the $27 million, how much have you guys raised in total at this point?
So, I'm going to get it wrong. We've more than doubled it.
So in excess of 50.
It's going to be in excess. It's going to be close to around 50. Yeah, that's right.
Excellent, man. And then the usual question is, so what are you doing with the money?
Oh yeah, so we have a plan and that we put together, and there's essentially 4 components. We'll see if I can remember them all while we're while we're speaking about it. But number one, we're actually making some big investments in open source. And today, the details were relatively low, but we actually have several things in the pipeline that we're getting ready to announce in regards to open source. But basically, we see open source as critical for us to both contribute back to and also integrate with in deep and new ways that we haven't done before. So that's going to be something that's new and exciting and interesting. We also are doubling down on our commitment to be a best-in-breed platform. So that means investing in deeper integrations. we've seen there's really a lot of people, a lot of platforms making the play of, CI/CD. It's basically a bunch of bash scripts. Let's see if we can just add it onto our platform. And we think that that's just not giving the respect that it deserves and the importance that it deserves. So we're making a deep investment in saying, you know what, we're going to be a platform that integrates with all of the other platforms that people want to use, rather than a sort of one size fits all sort of vendor lock-in solution. And we've seen it with our customers, right? We have customers where they can't get all of their engineering teams to agree on what cloud provider to use, let alone what Git provider to use. So having a platform where it's agnostic, but they can come together and they can collaborate in sort of neutral ground, that's actually really valuable. So we're going to be doubling down on that and building a lot deeper integrations. And you'll see some integrations coming deeper, even into performance monitoring solutions and things like that, getting deeper into sort of the end of the stack. So that kind of brings us to number 3, which is getting deeper on continuous delivery. Now, we were one of the first platforms to have a built-in step for doing canary releases or blue-green deployments to Kubernetes. In addition to all of our Kubernetes integrations, one-click rollbacks, Helm integrations, those kinds of things, and Terraform as well. So we're going to be getting a lot more robust with those tools. We're coming at this from a really strong CI background, and our CD background is good, but we think that it is not we think that it can be a much stronger sort of differentiator for us. And the fourth thing is investing in enterprise security on the CodeFresh runner, which is the component that we have where you can deploy it behind the firewall and you can run builds on your own infrastructure, but you basically eliminate all the maintenance and management overhead that comes with doing that traditionally. And that's squarely aimed at that Jenkins market that's thinking, okay, Jenkins is end of life. What's next? What tool should we be using? There's the cloud choices, and of course, CodeFresh has a cloud offering, but there's the on-prem choices as well, and they usually come with a lot of maintenance overhead. And we think we've found just the perfect mix where our enterprise customers deploy the CodeFresh runner. It meets their security requirements, and it gets rid of all of the management requirements because it's essentially self-updating, self-managed component that you can just drop into a cluster anywhere, whether that's behind the firewall in a virtual private cloud, on-prem, even on your own developer's laptop. So this is something that we've been investing heavily in, and we're going to be making some announcements very shortly about changes to that component and how we're supporting enterprise security. So those are the big areas. It's really investing in engineering. That's the big stuff, engineering and growth.
Excellent, man. I love it. I love the strategy. You've mentioned it a few times in our talk, and if you don't, we have a few minutes. Let's dive into it. I think one of the trends we've been seeing in the DevOps market is a lot of companies trying to do, I call it the soup to nuts DevOps or the end-to-end DevOps, right? We see it with a couple of the GitLab, GitHub are, have moved from beyond just being a repo or, to moving into CI/CD security and even, AI ops and what we used to call application performance management, APM. Really, that whole stack, right? We see it with a lot of the CI/CD players. You mentioned, if you're talking about Jenkins, you think of CloudBees, and you see, CloudBees with feature flags and a bunch of other kind of acquisitions. The company that was created, .ai, digital.ai, right, is the Zibia Labs with CollabNet, and they've acquired 3 or 4 other companies. So certainly there seems to be a trend here of go big in terms of not just money raised, but in terms of scope of offering versus I think what's traditional always been, which is, or at least in DevOps, which is, go deep, right? Do what you do and do it really, really well, better than everyone else. It seems like CodeFresh is opting right now, at least certainly, go deep, right?
Yeah,
go deep
and
on CI/CD.
This actually goes to a story that Raziel Tabib, one of our co-founders and of course our CEO, was telling Business Insider in a piece that was out today. He was telling a story where with some early investors, he was showing CodeFresh and he was saying, look, you can do this and you can do that. And everything he showed, there was an investor who would say, well, I can do that with Jenkins today. And I can do that with Jenkins today. And finally, Raziel sort of snapped back and he said, imagine if you were sitting here and I was pitching you Zoom and I was showing you all the things that Zoom can do. And you were saying, well, go to webinar or go to meeting can do that and go to meeting can do this. But none of us could possibly think that there is not a difference, just a world of difference between the web, communications platforms of yesteryear and what we're using today. It's totally different, and the quality of the software is totally different, and that's really what we're doing with CodeFresh. You can script your way into doing anything, just like you can play Pac-Man on Microsoft Excel. Is that a good, useful way to spend your time? Is that an accurate replacement for an Xbox or something like that? Of course not. What we're talking about is there's almost a thought that CI/CD is commoditizing, and that's actually missing the point of the value that CI/CD brings. If you have a real DevOps platform, and I do think of our platform as a DevOps platform rather than strictly a CI/CD platform, you're actually talking about a much larger transformation in the way that an organization builds and deploys software. So we think that there's a huge qualitative difference in the same way that Zoom has totally disrupted the telecommunications market, their security issues notwithstanding. We feel like CodeFresh is positioned and doing the same thing to the DevOps market.
I'll give you even a better example, Dan. When I first started DevOps.com 7+ years ago, so many DevOps startups back then would hear from their investors, much as what your CEO heard on Jenkins. I could do that with Puppet. I could do it with Chef. I could write a recipe. I could write a script, and Puppet and Chef could do that. Why would I use any of this stuff? Puppet and Chef could do it all. Right? That was 8 years ago, right? And look where we are now, right?
Yeah, well, we've discovered that we can't actually do as much as we thought, and I'm sure...
Well, just because you can.
Doesn't mean you should. Yeah, that's right.
That's exactly it.
It's the same with every disruptive technology. I don't know if you're familiar with Clay Christensen and disruptive innovation, but it's the same thing with the iPhone and the BlackBerry, right? When the iPhone first came out, it was like, well, it was pretty, but like everybody with the BlackBerry said, well, this will never replace my BlackBerry. I mean, look at all the stuff I can do with my BlackBerry. And of course, we're talking about a total difference in approach here that changes the way that people interact with their smartphone. CodeFresh is in the same situation today, and it's what we've seen with our customers, and it's what we've seen with our community, is that they are able to affect a level of change that simply wasn't possible on other highly scripted platforms. And it goes to our architecture and our integrations and all those kinds of things. But that is really key, and I don't mean to make too much of a sales pitch, but that is the key to...
No, I put it in your face. I wanted you to come out with it. Yeah, well, I don't even want to say it on camera. We'll talk later. But anyway, but Dan, that is what we're looking for. I want to know why people want to use CodeFresh beyond just that you raise some money now, right? So we're about out of time. Let me first of all say congratulations to you and the whole team there. Raising money, especially in today's environment, remotely and everything else. Good job, man. We'll be looking for a lot of these engineering investments kind of manifesting themselves over the next weeks and months with new stuff. And come back and join us, because I don't know when I'm going to see you at a conference again.
I know. We'll have to Zoom again.
Absolutely. All right. Dan Garfield for CodeFresh here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Our next interview is with Juan Asano of Encipher. You know, the security secrets space is also one that's heated up over the coming months. And of course, the HashiCorp Vault product is probably the leader in that. Vault is just a powerhouse in that space. Well, Encipher recently partnered with HashiCorp to provide more encryption and secure your security secrets. I had a chance to talk with Juan Asano of Encipher about this partnership and the capabilities, and here's our interview on that right now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this segment of TechStrong TV. For this segment, I just found out we're actually joined by kind of a neighbor. You know, it's not that often that we get other tech and cybersecurity folks that are based here in South Florida. But I'm happy to introduce you to Juan Asano? Juan, say it for us. How do you pronounce your name?
Asano.
Juan Asano. And Juan is with Encipher and based right down here in Sunrise area in South Florida, which is near Fort Lauderdale, which is the picture that you see behind me on screen is actually Fort Lauderdale. So Juan, you know, in normal times, I would have invited you up in person to do this with me, but of course, COVID prevents us from doing that. But welcome to TechStrong TV.
Good to be here.
So, you know, before we jump into this HashiCorp Vault Encipher thing, let's do a little kind of foundational stuff. You know, about half our audience is our cyber folks, the other half kind of DevOps, cloud native. For those who may not be familiar with Encipher, why don't you give them a quick little background?
Okay, so Encipher is part of Entrust Data Card, and we specialize in hardware security modules, commonly called HSMs. And HSMs are actually specialized devices that hold and manage cryptographic keys for different applications that are using cryptography. And as we all know, you know, applications use cryptography all the time. So we have a very wide spectrum of different applications that we support with our HSMs by protecting the underpinning keys that protects the data and the access to different types of solutions. So we are actually in a very good place, you know, in technology, because we sit as the root of trust for a lot of different applications, and with more and more different approaches to doing business, you know, online and in distributed systems, the demand for that root of trust is there in order to secure the entire ecosystem.
Sure. And of course, you know, fodder for another interview on another day. Recently, there was some talk of introducing yet another bill in Congress to allow the government sort of a backdoor into some of these encryption systems and encrypted data, you know, stuff. And you know, I think they just don't understand the math, and they don't understand what encryption is all about, but whatever. Juan, what about you personally? How did you get to be with Encipher? What's your role there?
Okay, so I am the Director of Products, Solutions, and Partner Marketing. And I've actually been for the company a long time. I've been in the business all my life. Started off with the federal government, working with the Army as well as a civilian, and then moved into private industry and worked for actually different names of the company that has been transformed over the years. Yeah, I've been in the business for over 25 years, and you know, looking at both the government side, the military side, and the commercial side.
Excellent. All right, let's jump into what we wanted to talk about today. There's recently an announcement of a partnership, an alliance, whatever you want to call it, between Encipher and HashiCorp,
Correct.
the makers of the Vault product, which is, HashiCorp has an amazing lineup of tools on the DevOps side of the house. A lot of people are familiar with Vagrant and some of their other, great developer tools. But Vault is it's not a secret. Everyone kind of knows about Vault, and no pun intended with it being a secret. But it's really become it's the dominant player for secrets, right? And storage and of that. And you guys are partnering with HashiCorp Vault on this, right?
Yes, that is correct. So, I mentioned earlier that I lead our technology partnerships. So it's part of our aim to align ourselves with industry leaders in different types of applications so that we can provide enhanced security through the establishment of a root of trust with our solutions. So our partnership with HashiCorp is directed at just that. We have an environment where we have more and more applications being used in a distributed type of environment. We have DevOps that are requesting and using lots of different types of credentials, right? Credentials for access, credentials for different accounts, different applications. And all of this is creating a what's called the secrets sprawl problem. And it's something that, we can all relate to that on a personal basis. You and I have, a host of different accounts that we have to remember our PINs and we have to remember our passwords. And, we carry, tokens with us to allow us to do two-factor authentication and all of this. And this kind of environment, when you look at it at the enterprise scale, it really becomes very hard to ensure that all these keys are given a consistent security policy. Because what we have is a lot of these different applications have their own sort of siloed approaches to storing and managing keys. But they're all kind of organized in different ways, and then the security policy for one is different than the other. And at the end of the day, organizations don't know how many keys and credentials they have, let alone being able to establish a consistent security policy across all of that. And that is essentially what HashiCorp is doing. They have identified this problem and they have developed this Vault capability that really brings all of those keys into one centralized repository so that they're given then a consistent security policy across the organization. And then the other aspect is, you might think, well, okay, problem solved, but you have to also think about, now that you have all these keys together, you have to make sure that you protect the keys that are protecting those keys and credentials. And that's where we come in, providing that root of trust to ensure that the encryption key that is protecting the master key for that vault, that really unseals that vault, is giving a very high level of security. And that's where the HSM comes in to do that. And that's essentially the partnership that we have with HashiCorp that we have just announced last week to ensure that we have consistent security policies delivered by Vault, and also enhanced security for the master keys that are protecting all those credentials.
Excellent. Just, I interviewed Mitchell a number of times and people from Vault, but I don't have the numbers at my fingertips. I mean, when I said that Vault is a dominant player in that space, any idea how many organizations are using Vault for secrets management?
Well, I can't give you a number specifically, but I can tell you that it is very, very hot. It is a hot type of environment now, because what I described in terms of the fact that, it's a problem that keeps growing as more and more applications are used by different organizations, different types of environments. The work from home environment now, everybody has even more applications that they're using remotely. So it's a very growing market, and one that is also kind of evolving, because we've had also the privileged account management,
Right.
which is kind of tightly related to this. It's when you talk about management, it's really a superset of privileged account management. So it becomes imperative to actually be able to ensure consistent security policies and an established root of trust for those keys that are actually, your keys to the kingdom, if you will.
I agree with you. So Juan, let's get in. So with this announcement and this offering, talk to us. If you're already in an organization that's using Vault, what do you need to do to kind of get the N-Cipher piece in here and making it work? What do you suggest?
Okay, so this is actually a very seamless integration, and as part of our integration program, the technology partnerships that we have across our enterprise. So we actually have over 140 different partners that we have documented integrations with. So it's no different than that. We have a documented integration for the addition of an Enshield HSM to work together with the HashiCorp Vault. And essentially it is deploying the system. It can be done in a on-premise configuration, or it can also be done as a service. And the HSM then takes over the fact of hosting and managing what is called the encryption key that protects the master key that unseals the vault and its contents, which is actually all the secrets that the organization keeps.
Excellent. I mean, it's seamless. It's easy like that. What about in terms of cost? How is it kind of priced? And I just want to give people an idea. I don't need exact numbers, and if you don't have, that's okay. But just wanted to get an idea of how it's sold. What is it based on? How many? How big an installation, or etc.
Yeah. Well, the what you're talking about is protecting, master keys, right? So it's not that the HSM is not constantly being called out every time that an application needs, a key, because that is actually what Vault is doing. So we are protecting those master keys. So essentially, a typical application will include, 2 HSMs for high availability to ensure that those keys are never, are always there when needed. And HSMs are available, the on-premise deployment is available as a platform. It is a rack-mountable, unit. It's called the Enshield. And that same unit can also be in the cloud and offered as a service as well. And
so that's interesting. So in the cloud, is it a software only then, or
no? It's actually
the cloud providers actually have the HSM,
the same HSM that you would be using on premise, but we also offer that as a service. So it's an HSM that you will be leasing and using to store your cryptographic keys.
Oh, that's great.
You do that as a service. And
I didn't realize.
Another important aspect is that HSMs can be used, as I said, to protect a host of different applications. And an HSM can be used to protect, keys for one application as well as others. So the use of an HSM is not just
multi-service.
One application. Yeah, you can spread cost around. Yeah.
Excellent. And this is available now, right? This isn't pie in the sky coming. It's available now.
Yes, it is available now.
Okay. Sounds like, where can people get more information about it?
Okay, so we actually have a page that contains all the information available on the integration as well as all the related materials. It is available at ncipher.com. You can land there and get all the information. I also published a recent blog just a few days ago that you might have seen. That is called Secret. The secrets that you keep.
Okay.
And, you might have seen it's actually in Security Boulevard.
Yeah, sure.
You might have seen that, and that has a link directly to this page that I'm talking about.
Fantastic. Hey, man, thanks for the Security Boulevard plug. We always appreciate that one. Thank you very much. Look, sounds like a great partnership. Sounds like a great offering, something that's needed. And you're right, the Hashi Vault, I mean, we hear a lot about it. When we used to travel around a lot to conferences, we'd hear a lot about it. We still hear while we're here, but of course we're not traveling as much. Juan, I want to thank you for joining us on TechStrong TV. Come back, talk to us more. I'd love to get into you with your whole views around what we can do to, there's this issue of, in an emergency, do you need data or access to encryption or encrypted data, but people should have a real right to privacy to what's encrypted. And you've been in this for a long time, as you said. I'm not as old as you are. I am. But, I'd love to hear your views on this and what you think the right course is, the right path is in terms of government access to encrypted data and what we can do. It's going to take a public-private partnership in order to make that work, and interesting stuff.
That is actually something that we are also involved in with regards to as more information gets put in the cloud and as more workloads are handled in the cloud, we also provide bring your own key capabilities so that you are in control of the cryptographic keys that are protecting your data that's no longer in your physical boundaries. And that's, I would love to come back and then have a chat about that.
Love to. All right. Hey, Juan, thanks for, what? At some point, this COVID stuff hopefully will go away, and you'll come up here. We could do it in person and have some lunch, okay? All right, my friend. Be well. Hey, thank you. This is Alan Schimmel on TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Our next interview features Jen Miller Osborne of the Palo Alto Unit 42 team. That's their threat research team. They came across an interesting in a bad way, I guess, bad actor. These folks had put up into the Docker Hub, Docker registry, copies of Docker images that were very similarly named to very, very popular Docker images that are downloaded millions of times. And these similarly named Docker images had all of the code that, the quote-unquote real Docker images had, but with a little something extra, right? And that something extra turned your machine into somewhat of a zombie that allowed you to do, or that made your machine do coin mining, bit mining, for the people who put the images up. So they couldn't get enough power, enough machines to do their own coin mining, and they would trying to set up sort of a SETI kind of network to have your machine do their bit mining for them. You know, these bad guys know no bounds. Anyway, Jen and the Unit 42 team discovered this and have made it known. Let's go to our interview now with Jen, and you can hear more about it.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on this episode of TechStrong TV. We're joined on this episode by Jen Miller Osborne, who is with Unit 42 from Palo Alto Networks. Jen, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you on. Jen, you know, I think our audience is plenty familiar with Palo Alto Networks, and then there's a good segment of them who are actually familiar with Unit 42. But just in case, why don't you give us a little background, real briefly, on Palo Alto and more on Unit 42?
Sure. So Unit 42 was started by our former CSO, Rick Howard, and the intent was for Palo Alto Networks to have a team of researchers who were solely dedicated to doing threat research. And what I mean by that is we aren't tied in or responsible for any kind of the product software development cycle things. We work very closely with our product teams to ensure that we have coverage, especially as we find anything that's new, but we aren't tied into any of those cycles, which allows our team to do some of the more both long-term in-depth research into campaigns, as well as being able to pivot more quickly when we see some sort of new trend or new kind of attack coming on. So the name is kind of started as an inside joke. So Palo Alto Networks Threat Intelligence Team is really, really hard to say if you have to start saying it repeatedly. And if you think about acronyms you might make out of it, none of them are really very good or things you would want to use. So the 42 started as a reference to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? Where 42 is supposed to be the answer to the ultimate question, which is, you know, life, the universe, everything. And it was 42. So our boss started that as kind of a joke, as a goal for a threat intelligence team, right? To be able to answer everything. And then the unit was really just a reference to the fact that he was both retired military, a number of executives at the time were retired military, and a couple of people on the team are as well. So it started as this internal, just easier way to refer to us, and we ended up really liking it, so it stuck.
It's a good name. It's a good name. And if I'm not mistaken, you are retired military, correct?
I'm not retired, but I'm separated. I was in the Air Force for 9 years. So, yep.
Okay.
I'm one of the vets.
And why don't, just whatever you feel comfortable with, but why don't you give us a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I started in the Air Force. I actually had a full scholarship to college for genetic engineering, and I realized I really didn't want to be in a lab 13 or more hours a day for the rest of my life, but I had absolutely no idea what else I wanted to do, and my scholarship was tied to genetic engineering. So growing up, I had actually really liked languages. I started studying languages when I was really young in elementary school, and I knew that I could go and study languages for the Air Force, and that would kind of be something I like to do. I would get a job, I'd get skills, and my overarching goal was kind of, I'll do that for now, and then I'll figure out what I want to be when I grow up later. And while I was in the military, I was fortunate enough to be working when the government first started getting into kind of computers, information security, and cybersecurity and things like that. And because there wasn't a workforce for it, they asked for volunteers. So me liking languages and also being a former computer geek, I just thought it would be fun. I was like, sure, I'll sign up for that. Like, that sounds great. I had no idea it would turn into anything other than, you know, just kind of like a brief amusement. And almost 20 years later, which feels really odd to say, here I am. And it's turned into a career that I really love. So got lucky.
Fantastic. You know what? So I've been in the security business for 20 something years. And it's funny, if you go back, you know, that long, you didn't have cybersecurity as a major or a area of concentration, whatever they call it, in some colleges and universities now. Most security people got into security for a number of reasons. Either they were the network person and kind of they were forcibly volunteered to also do security, right? Or they're the kind of people who kind of like breaking things and then figuring out how to make them unbreakable, or breaking them and putting them back together like puzzles, and those people kind of gravitate to it. But there wasn't sort of a formal path to cyber and to well, they didn't even call it cyber, it was InfoSec. There wasn't a formal path to InfoSec back then. It was, it was quite a collection, actually. But there was also a lot of passion, like you, right? And you know what they say, if you find something that you love to do, you never work a day in your life. And I often find that way, right? I went to law school and hated it. And when I got into computers, I found my passion, and I've been doing it ever since. And I love what I do, so it's all good. Anyway, thanks for sharing that with us. Unit 42 recently came out with some troubling research. Well, I'm going to let you tell it, not me. It's your story. What'd you guys find?
Sure. So we found an actor who had managed to create legitimate seeming images and post them to their account on Docker Hub to put them there for other people to download. And what they did was, the only thing about the image itself that isn't legitimate is they added a script for a coin miner that launches as soon as someone downloads and runs the repository. And it does this in the background, and it doesn't do this in a way that would be easy to detect. It doesn't, doesn't spike a CPU. It doesn't take up crazy network time or like cycles. So to the people that download these and use them, they look perfectly fine, and it seems like it's running as intended. But really, they're also at the same time making money for these attackers who trick them into downloading it. For the one wallet,
absolutely. Let's let me do a little setting of the plate here. First of all, Docker Hub, of course, is a registry where people can put kind of like, as I call it, certified Docker images that it's like it's a repository, right? A repo that people can then download those images and use. And it seems that this person he had put up images that in all other aspects were legitimate images to be using for Docker. So Jennifer, within that, these images that were deposited into Docker Hub that seemed otherwise legitimate, he had, or we assuming it's a he, it could have just as easily been a they or a she or whatever, right? Had inserted a script which turned the people who downloaded that Docker container into a zombie for all intents and purposes, or a bot to perform data mining or coin mining, bit mining for them, which is, and why would someone want someone to do that? Is it malicious? Not malicious per se, in that they're not ransomware or something like that. But what they're doing is, in order to do that kind of Bitcoin mining or coin mining, it's so energy intensive and compute intensive to do that you could brown out neighborhoods if you set up too many machines doing it in a concerted effort in an area, and so by spreading it out in sort of a SETI-like network of all these machines doing it, right? You spread that load around, and which if people want to sign up for that and share in the profits, so be it. Good for them. But to do it without people's knowledge, right? To do it without people's knowledge is kind of rotten and malicious. So how did you guys find this?
So the researchers for this actually used some kind of in-depth knowledge. So they know what the legitimate packages are typically named. They have a kind of standard naming schema. So what they set out to do was look for ones that didn't quite follow that. So things where, maybe they added a bunch of numbers to the end, something where it would still potentially look legitimate, but the file name wasn't quite right. And then they narrowed it down from there, because those were already not legitimate, so they knew there was potentially something malicious going on. And that's how they then ran across this one particular user account that had 2 million downloads
Oh my
from
God.
the repository of their malicious ones. So, and the only wallet we've been able to identify the amount of funds in, because they're using more than one, has more than $36,000 in it. So this is clearly making them a pretty good amount of money. And all they had to do was put those, repositories up there for people to download and literally just wait for them to download and profit.
Yeah, no, wait for them to download it and they become their little zombies. So, wow, crazy stuff, right? I wonder, have you contacted or had any feedback from people who unintentionally downloaded the images and kind of what? No, there's been no.
No, we didn't reach out. We reached out to Docker to let them know about the account, and they shut it down immediately. But yeah, we didn't.
I'm sure they did.
Yeah, and you can't necessarily identify everyone that would have downloaded it just from knowing there was a pull request to knowing who it was.
So how do we prevent this from happening again?
People, and this is something we've been saying over and over as attackers are doing things like this, they really, really, really need to be careful. They're downloading the legitimate repositories. In this case, paying more attention to the actual file name would have been a clue that this was not actually a legitimate repository that they were downloading. And that's been true for so many things we've seen attackers move to as they've adapted with technology, right? So for a long time, it's been the advice we had to give around mobile apps for everything, because there's a lot of malicious abuse and abuse like this among mobile apps, because that's a massive market and a ton of people use them. More people have mobile devices than have laptops anymore. So that makes sense. So now you're just seeing that same sort of pattern. The attackers that are doing that, or were doing that, are shifting to cloud areas where they can now potentially make more money. And in some cases it's easier because, there's a perceived air of extra security or legitimacy around a lot of cloud stuff. It's not very well understood by the masses right now. And attackers are taking advantage of that people think it's just by nature more secure.
I agreed. Was there any kind of tip-off or anything to you guys that when you went looking for this, other than that you just saw some odd names that were probably similar to very popular packages that were up there?
From there, we had to download the repositories ourselves and analyze them to find it. And that's another way attackers are kind of getting around traditional security, because a lot of networks right now, they don't inspect what's inside a container itself. No. So it's kind of an easy loophole right now that a lot of attackers are exploiting. So I know with like other repositories, right, whether it's JavaScript or artifacts or I know some Go artifacts, like I'm thinking about specifically companies like JFrog, Sonatype, some of the other folks who do repositories. Excuse me. They've developed security products that will scan the components or artifacts or whatever you're downloading from the repo, right? They'll make sure it's the latest version of a particular artifact or what have you, or script. They'll make sure, that there's no malicious code or we have that as well. Payload there. Palo Alto, you do? Mm-hmm. Yes, Prisma has a trusted image feature, and if that's enabled for the Prisma Cloud customers, it does that same kind of checking to make sure that it's the actual image that you thought it was. And what repos does and this is probably outside, I realize you're not a product manager, I apologize, but what kind of repositories does Prisma scan for? I'm sure it does all the big three. Yeah? Oh, so that's great then. Yeah. I didn't realize it, and thanks for educating me and our audience. But, can we get something similar for Docker images? I'm honestly not certain. I think ours actually does Docker. That's one of the ones that it does. Yeah. Would it have picked this up, you think? And I'm not... It does. It certainly does now. Good. So,
again, if people are using the right tools, we can protect them from this type of behavior, malicious stuff.
But the biggest issue we see with a lot of cloud things is a lack of proper configuration, right? It's not the containers themselves, it's a lack of understanding often on the consumer side of how to then properly configure it. It's kind of the same thing we saw, with the initial shift away from on-prem architecture, right? A lot of the things that you need to still configure and tweak that you had to do on-prem, you still have to do some similar versions of it in the cloud.
Absolutely.
And there's a learning curve there. I think people are starting to become more and more aware of it, but that's definitely the number one time we see problems with these things. It's almost always a configuration issue.
Excellent. Makes all the sense in the world to me. And I'm sitting here thinking, Palo had gotten Twistlock, which had a great actual container. I used to call it like a container firewall kind of thing. Yeah, so that absolutely had that built in. Momentary lapse of reason. I apologize.
We've done a bit of acquisitions lately. It's hard to keep track.
A few. Anyway, hey, Jen, you know what? Thanks to you and the Unit 42 team for discovering this. I mean, no one wants to be played like that, right? And it's not right. So good work. Keep up the great work. I know you guys do really, really important. Your mission is well guided and well aimed and much appreciated.
Thank you. It is very nice to hear.
Thank you. All right. Jen Miller Osborne from Unit 42, Threat Research Intelligence at Palo Alto Networks. Thanks for joining us on TechStrong TV. We'll have you on soon.
Thanks. I had a great time.
All righty. This is Alan Schimmel, TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest.
I got the burgers. I went to Bun Barn, Beef Patty Palace, Tomato Town.
Oh, thanks for getting all this, honey.
No problem. Getting all of it just took about 2 hours.
I just wish there was an easier way to get all your burger fixings from one place,
Wow.
Dad, you didn't go to Mayo King?
You know our car doesn't fit in their drive-thru. I went to Mustard Chef.
I hate this burger.
He also went to ketchup.
When you're building something using components that don't work together easily, things could get ugly, fast. You wouldn't live like this, so don't make your DevOps team live like this.
This lack of burger cohesion is hard on all of us, Cheryl.
GitLab is the only single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle.
Our next segment is the Something Old for Today, again from TechStrong Con. And I'm really happy to feature a session that Matt Chiotti, VP Cloud Security over at Palo Alto, did. It's not particularly on cloud security or anything with Palo Alto. It's actually 3 steps for emerging as a leader by enabling innovation. It's a really good presentation by Matt. And Matt is a leader who leads well there, and I think you'll see that come through loud and clear in this session. Have a listen to it. I think there's something to learn here. Let's now go to Matt Chiotti from TechStrong Con.
"94% of managers, when surveyed, said that innovation was lacking in their organization. 94%. This is from a McKinsey survey that was done a number of years ago. My name is Matt Chiotti, and I'm the Chief Security Officer of Public Cloud at Palo Alto Networks. And today I'm going to be talking about 3 steps that you can take to emerge as a leader and to enable innovation in your organization. So one of the things that I think is interesting is that organizations in general struggle with innovation. And part of that reason, based upon my research, is that even the definition of innovation is elusive to some companies. So I thought, for the purpose of this, why don't we start out with a couple definitions of what innovation means? And so I went right out to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and it says that innovation is the introduction of something new, a new idea, a method, or device. That for me wasn't actually that helpful. So I went out to another source, and I thought that Fast Company did a really good job defining what innovation is. And this is what they said. I'm just going to read it. Quote, innovation is the process through which value is created and delivered to a community of users in the form of a new solution. This is from Fast Company. I'll read it one more time. Innovation is the process through which value is created and delivered to a community of users in the form of a new solution. That's a definition that I think we can use, and I want you to keep that in the back of your mind as we talk through the 3 steps. So again, keep that in mind, right? Remember, 94% of organizations are struggling with this. With that in mind, I live in the world of cloud. For over the last decade, cloud and cloud security are the only things that I have really been focused on from a professional perspective. So I want to give you 3 examples of innovation from the cloud. And I think this is one that should resonate with each one of you. One of the things that I have found is that cloud has absolutely modernized the software development lifecycle in most companies, whether they've adopted cloud holistically or not. And let me give you 3 areas inside of this. The first one is that most organizations that have adopted cloud have moved from waterfall software development methodologies to agile. In fact, some organizations probably took the move from waterfall to agile well over a decade ago. So waterfall to agile, that's an example of innovation, right? Businesses were not satisfied with software being released on an annual basis. It didn't work because organizations need to move faster than that. Another example of innovation being driven by a technology, in this case, specifically cloud. Think about how software was traditionally released. Maybe it was done annually. Maybe if it was aggressive, it was done on a quarterly basis. But for the most part, when organizations adopted DevOps, this is when software, in fact, demanded to be released quicker. Businesses need it. No longer was it acceptable to have software that was released on that slow of a basis. So this is an example of innovation. And then the last area, and again, this is something that I believe and I've seen cloud actually drive and in some ways push upon an organization, is the whole move from monolithic software to microservices. And for a lot of organizations, this has really come about through the adoption of containers. So you might be familiar with Docker and Kubernetes. Well, when you think about a traditional software or legacy software, a lot of times you had one big piece of software, and that software might have done 1,000 different things. And it was one piece of software. Well, now with Docker and with microservices, we're able to take those 1,000 things and break them into their own component parts. And so now if an app, instead of an app doing 1,000 things, it may only do one thing, and it lives in a container. These are just some examples of how a technology like cloud is driving innovation. And I believe cloud offers many opportunities for you to innovate in your organization. And I'll talk about some of those a little bit later in the presentation. So the 3 steps that I really want to talk about in more detail are like this. Number 1, I believe that obviously right now as a global society, we are all going through COVID-19. And for many organizations, and I get to speak with literally hundreds of customers over the course of any year, and especially over the last number of weeks, depending upon the industry, generally speaking, there has been a slowdown, not just economically, but even with just the flow of projects. And I think this is what represents the opportunity zone. And if we were in front of a live audience, I would have showed you just a diagram that, think about it this way. If you would go over to a whiteboard or just a piece of paper and you would draw demand for projects. And in my world, specific to cloud, digital transformation projects, cloud transformation projects. That line was pretty much almost not necessarily straight up, but was on a very steep angle. When a number of weeks ago, when I first started to look through this, actually in late April, I wrote a blog on the news stack that you can go out and find. It was called Cloud Security in the age of COVID-19. You can find that on the news stack. But what I talked about and what I drew was this line, and about how when the slowing started, you have this temporary drop in demand. And it doesn't matter whether it might be something specific to your industry. Maybe you're a developer, maybe you're a security practitioner. But the bottom line is there was a drop. And maybe in certain industries, it's still there. But the beginning of that opportunity zone, that's what's marked by the beginning of a crisis or any type of huge event. People are trying to deal with it psychologically. They're trying to understand the impacts. That represents the beginning of the opportunity zone. But then as people absorb information, they start to feel more confident. That's when things start to ramp back up again. And that kind of marks the end of the opportunity zone. And so I believe that where we are right now globally, we're still in that opportunity zone. And this is why I believe it's so important for you to really consider these 3 steps, and then how you as a professional or as a group or as an organization, about how you can really use these to fuel innovation in your organization. So step 1, time to reflect. Well, for most of us, COVID-19 has really forced us to slow down. And this, I think for many, has been a blessing in disguise. I like to call this our global slowing. This has allowed us the opportunity to really think and to step back and to analyze. And what I think this could mean for you, let's say you're a security professional, this is a great opportunity to step back and to actually think about what has actually changed versus what's being talked about on social media. So there's perception and then there's reality. And so what this might look like for you is you might step back, look at perhaps some threat research, and try to understand what has changed. How does this impact my security program? So let me give you one data point that we found at Palo Alto Networks. And so at Palo Alto Networks, we have an amazing threat research group. All of our threat research is free. You can read that. All you need to do is go to unit42.paloaltonetworks.com/cloud, and you can find all of our threat research specific to cloud. One of the things that we did was we went out and we wanted to actually see how are attackers utilizing cloud to take advantage of the current situation. And so what we did was we went out and we analyzed over 1 million newly observed host names. And we looked for those host names that were specific to COVID, coronavirus, pandemic, vaccine. We looked for those words. And then we started to break it down into categories. We found that out of those 1.2 million, over 86,000 of them were malicious. This means that maybe they do command and control, maybe they do phishing, maybe they do malware. And then we broke it down again and we said, well, let's see specific to those newly observed host names that are hosted in the public cloud providers. And we actually found good news. We found that only 3%, so just over 2,800 of these domains were hosted in the cloud. And so I think that's just a little example of how you can kind of break apart the noise and look at the reality. Look at what does the threat research actually say? And this would be extremely helpful if, of course, you are a security professional. If you're a developer, then the data points that you might look at a state of the DevOps report or something like that to see what's actually changed. And so the key question for you then is, if you're a security professional, is my security program positioned to address risk effectively in a post-COVID-19 world? That's a critical question to be able to ask. Now, after you've taken that time to reflect, the next step is to move into experimentation. One of the things I've found, and I think there's a very interesting corollary to back in 2008 with the great financial crisis, is that during these times of crisis, there's often a higher tolerance for trying new things. This is also a very unique part of the opportunity zone. You know, businesses, they're often looking for new revenue streams. And depending upon what industry you're in, Certain industries have been hit harder than others. And as your different business units are looking for new ways to generate revenue, this renewed appetite for revenue leads oftentimes to more risk. And so they're very often skewed towards doing things differently than they've been done before. So think about it. If you have a business unit and they are thinking about creative new ways that they can generate revenue, what's now on their whiteboard is going to eventually end up, from a technology perspective, in the cloud. Most new projects, in fact, I haven't seen pretty much any, maybe only within federal governments, most new projects are going to the cloud. And so the question for you then becomes, under this experimentation phase, is what are some small projects based upon data that you found, based upon what's actually changed for your industry? What are some small projects that you can take on to try to address those changes? I don't want you to think in terms of massive projects, but projects that can maybe be done within 90 days. And so questions, and when you think about things that are now on whiteboards in different business units, they're on a whiteboard, they're going to end up in the cloud. So from a security perspective, a key question in the experimentation phase is to ask yourself, how can you position your team to have complete visibility, compliance, and governance across all form factors in the cloud? And remember, if your organization is moving and they're doing things new in the cloud, doing things in a lift and shift manner, that's not being done anymore. Most organizations probably haven't done that for 3 to 5 years. Most new applications that are going into the cloud are being developed in a cloud native capacity. All that means is they're taking advantage of all the things that make cloud cloudy. You still will have some mix of virtual machines, containers, and maybe even serverless functions. So a key question for your security program is to ask, how can you position your team to have complete visibility and governance across all those form factors, both on-premise as well as in the cloud? And then the second question that I think is really important during the experimentation phase is to ask, what changes could you make today for a cloud native future? So let me give you an example of one way that I think you could really have a quick and demonstrable impact on innovation as a security professional in your organization. Now, many organizations have adopted infrastructure as code. In fact, if you would go and maybe speak to your DevOps organization or to your cloud organization, if you have one, and you ask, are you using infrastructure as code templates? Sometimes you'll see it abbreviated IAC. You might get the answer yes. But then when you go back and you look at how is the security team adopting these, a lot of times that number is much smaller. And for maybe some of those who are listening who aren't as familiar with infrastructure as code templates, the best way to think about them is, in the past, if you were to create new cloud infrastructure, you would have to log into your cloud service provider console, click here, get some compute, maybe some networking and some storage. But infrastructure as code templates, you don't have to do that. You now take those configurations that you want and you're able to put them in code, and then you can reuse that template over and over. And every time you have it, you will start from that same configuration. This is an excellent opportunity for security teams to be able to take their maybe security policies that are on paper and then put them into code. This is a great way that you as a security practitioner can start to build and offer innovation in your environment. Now, one of the things we know is that anytime you do innovation, anytime you change things in an organization, by its very nature, you introduce new risks. And one of the teams that I have the pleasure to lead at Palo Alto Networks is our Unit 42 Cloud Threat Team. This is a team of elite cloud threat researchers, and that's all they do is look at cloud and look at its impacts and help businesses to stay one step ahead of attackers. And so in our most recent cloud threat report, Spring 2020 edition, our team analyzed literally hundreds of thousands of these infrastructure as code templates because we knew organizations are adopting them in mass But security teams, for the most part, have not really started to look in depth at them. And what we found was actually quite shocking. So there's a couple areas here that I want to talk about, and I think this has some unique implications for innovation. Number one, we found that about 42% of AWS CloudFormation templates had at least one or more insecure configuration, 42%. And again, we pulled down and we analyzed using our Prisma Cloud scanner, literally hundreds of thousands of these. We pulled them down from places like GitHub, anything that was public, we pulled them down and analyzed, and that's how we found this. We found also that from a compliance perspective, that about 43% of cloud databases that are configured using these infrastructure as code templates, 43% of them have cloud databases that are not encrypted. And so these are just some examples about how I think that you should be adopting infrastructure as code. However, you need to look at it and figure out what is the risk that this brings to my business, and then how do I mitigate it? This, I believe, is a key question. Now, one other statistic that I'll leave you with, and then we'll move on to number 3, is that we also found within these infrastructure as code templates that about 60% of them disable cloud storage logging. 60%. So how does this impact you? Well, if you're using one of these templates in production and it's actually disabled your cloud storage logging, if you would have a developer or someone in IT open up a cloud storage bucket and perhaps there's sensitive information on it and someone discovers it, unfortunately, if you don't have logs, it becomes extremely difficult to be able to prove or disprove that you've had a breach or not. And so any type of attribution becomes extremely difficult. So infrastructure as code, this is an area I believe you should look at, especially from a security perspective. How can you adopt it? I believe this will be an area that will help you move the business along, will help you to innovate. Now, the third step within this opportunity zone is about transformation. Doing the analysis, looking at what's there in terms of experimentation. The purpose of experimentation is not just about experimentation. It's about how do you actually transform? And so, specific again to cloud is that prior to COVID-19, many security teams were just beginning to experiment with cloud native security. And so I think one of the key ways that you as a professional or maybe as a group or even as an organization can really start to measure the impact of your work while in this opportunity zone and as you move out of it is to look at metrics. Metrics are really, really important. There's a saying that says you get what you measure. If you're not measuring it, you're likely not to get what you're after. And so specific to transformation, I believe that metrics are absolutely key to cloud transformation success. Here's the other thing about metrics. If you keep them either to yourself or just to within your group, the power that those metrics have to help you transform is greatly lessened. I would encourage you to develop a very, very small set of metrics to start. Don't try to create 10, 20 different metrics, maybe just 3 to 5 to start to help you measure your transformation on some of these small, critical pilot experiments that we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. But I want you to make sure that they're public. The more people that know about them within your organization, the higher likelihood you actually have of achieving those because of the public pressure that comes from that. There's a positive side to peer pressure, and this is one of them. So there's a couple key questions in this transformation phase that I want you to look at. Number one is think about what new ground will security break and how will you get ahead of the pent-up demand? Remember that demand curve we were talking about was like this, then COVID-19 started to flatline. Now it's maybe starting to pick up again, depending upon your industry. There is pent-up demand. In fact, many of you have already seen that. It's already come back to full scale, and maybe even more so than before, because cloud, through this, has really started to show its resilience. All the things that we talked about, maybe even theoretically over a number of years, have really been proven out that the cloud can scale to meet demand. In fact, Microsoft released some of their statistics around Teams, and I think this was in Italy. They found it was a triple-digit percentage growth of their Teams platform. And so the bottom line here is that the cloud has proved that it can scale. And so there may be pent-up demand, and the question for you is, how do you get ahead of that? And from an infrastructure as code templates perspective, I want you to ask, how could you leverage these infrastructure as code templates for enforcing security standards? I shared with you some statistics that kind of show the negative side of it, but how could you leverage those templates to actually enforce your security standards? And then last question for this transformation step is, what metrics could we use to track innovation? So how do you apply some of the things we've talked about today? Well, I want to give you just a couple things to look at. I want to break it into what I think you can do over the next maybe 1 to 2 weeks, and then over the next 3 months, and then over the next 6 months. So first thing I want you to do, and that I recommend you do, and this should be done maybe over the next 1 to 2 weeks, is begin the process of defining what innovation means in your organization. And depending upon where you are organizationally, maybe you're an individual contributor, then you define what innovation means for you as a practitioner. If you're a manager over a group, and what does it mean for your group? If you're a CISO, what does it mean for your entire team? Whatever you are, define for what it means at your organizational level. This sounds simple, but as you've seen from that McKinsey study we talked about in the beginning, the vast majority of organizations struggle even just to define what it means in their organization. Also, over the next 1 to 2 weeks, I want you to really start to think about what has changed, what's really changed, and then what are some of the possible outcomes. This will then lead to the next step over the next 2 to 3 months, where I want you to pick 1 or 2 small projects that address the things that you've defined in terms of what's actually changed. And maybe again, for you, maybe this is adopting infrastructure as code templates. Maybe it's adopting containers and building those in such a way that they're secure. Whatever it means and whatever those projects are that you choose to go after, keep it small. Don't try to boil the ocean. Keep it to 1 to 2 projects that you think can have the maximum benefit. And then by keeping it to only 1 or 2, that will help you so that you don't lose focus. And then I want you for each one of those to define the success metrics for each. I want you to start small, and I want you to really time box these to under 90 days. Don't let them span out to be multiple months. This should be something that you should try to time box 90, 60, maybe even 30 days so that you can get a maximum impact and keep it small and get it out to the business so you can really be seen as an innovator in your organization. And then from a bigger perspective, maybe over the next 6 months, I want you to benchmark these experiments based upon your success metrics. This is going to be something, and these metrics, they're really going to be the only way you know, and again, defining the metrics up front and then looking back, they're going to be the only way you know if what you have done in your analysis and what you've done in your small projects is actually achieving the goals that you set forth. And then the last part of this is, although we're talking about these 3 steps in the frame of our current opportunity zone we're in with COVID-19, I want you to think about how can you make this a process that doesn't just end when this event passes us by, but how can you make this a process that you iterate on continuously over time? So while COVID-19 is one for the history books, it's presenting professionals, both security professionals and everyone across the board, with an unprecedented opportunity while we're in the opportunity zone. So the question specific to security professionals is, will you use this crisis to emerge as a new leader in your organization? The window of opportunity, it's not going to stay open forever. In fact, I hope, and I think we all hope, that it closes very soon. Start small, scale fast, and fail quickly, and make the most of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity while in the zone. Thank you for your time today. Again, my name is Matt Chiotti, and if you want to view any of our threat research, you can go to unit42.paloaltonetworks.com/cloud. Thank you.
It's now time for our look at the headlines around Security Boulevard, DevOps.com, and Container Journal. As usual, the caveat is these are just some headlines. Go check the articles themselves out, see what else is up there. All three sites have some amazing stuff. Over on Security Boulevard today, we have remote work pushes brute force attacks higher. We're seeing just huge DDoS attacks, and this COVID thing has just been a great opportunity for the bad guys, it seems. We also have white box encryption, ending web app vulnerabilities. It's a noble goal. Let's hope for the best. And then we also have Cisco makes economic case for cybersecurity. There's been an economic case for cybersecurity. It was always really hard, though. I always told people selling security was like selling insurance in a lot of ways. Hard to show ROI and that kind of stuff. Anyway, check out the article. Over on Container Journal, our friends at D2IQ brings machine learning to Kubernetes. Excellent stuff going on with the folks at D2IQ. We have an article on Red Hat integrates KubeVirt with Kubernetes management platform from SAP. I think we might have mentioned that one before. And then My Data donates chaos engineering tool for Kubernetes apps to CNCF. Again, I think that was the second CNCF donation in the last couple of days. Over on DevOps.com, we have SDM and the DevOps delusion of connected organizations. We also have how to synchronize Jira projects between two Jira instances. If that is a use case you've run into, good article for you there. And then also, survey finds IT teams rising to COVID-19 challenge. I think overall we have, and I God bless the IT teams who have kept the lights on, the networks open, and our Zoom's running, right? And then finally, the Open Mainframe Project pushes the Zoe platform into LTS. And I think that is continuing to see the maturation of the Zoe platform and mainframe DevOps. A bunch of companies behind that, of course, including IBM, and good to hear. So that's our news headlines for today. As I say, go check out the stories themselves. Check out the articles, the sites. There's so much there for you to see. But for now, we're going to head over to Charlene O'Hanlon, who has two great interviews for us lined up today. Charlene, over to you.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops. Very excited to have this conversation I'm about to have with Spandan Mahapatra. Am I right?
Yeah.
Great. Well, Spandan is the CTO of the high-tech business unit at Tata Consultancy Services. Thank you so much for taking a couple of minutes and talking with me, Spandan. Really do appreciate it.
Absolutely, Charlene. The pleasure is mine. I hope you and family are doing okay.
Yes, we're doing great. Thank you very much. Thank you for asking. I hope yours is doing well as well.
Absolutely. We are doing okay. Thank you.
So, the times being the way that they are, and we are in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic, I know a lot of business processes have changed for many, many companies who have had to scramble to get their workers up and running to be as productive as possible as they're working from home. So as part of that, I understand, has been the kind of the rise of what you guys are terming the SaaSification of business processes. So I wonder if you can kind of talk me through that a little bit. Maybe we can kind of start by setting the stage. What exactly do you guys mean by SaaSification?
Absolutely, Charlene. Thank you for this opportunity. As you rightly mentioned, the times have accelerated the demand in terms of how business processes are enabled by technology. As it has been said across multiple segments, the leverage of technology has accelerated tremendously during the COVID times. From our definition perspective, SaaSification actually is an umbrella theme that converges with business transformation at an accelerated pace with technology transformation. So what it means is processes that were currently either offline or were integrated through manual processes and had much more complicated mechanisms of delivery and consumption patterns, those were significantly changed and need to be changed as we are going through the COVID times to make it easy for consumers to have a better experience. For consumers to start adopting some of the prior world offerings that you had, whichever businesses you operated in, the mode of selling, the mode of consumption, and the mode of sustenance or support of that service or product is what is changed because of COVID-19 at an accelerated pace. In order to deliver that model, SaaSification is the theme that we are driving. It includes, but is not equivocal to subscription billing. Many people confuse the whole term that you take one particular offering and you offer it in a subscription billing pattern and you have achieved your goal around SaaSification. So it's actually not true. There are many other things, as we discussed today, which are very critical to embark upon this journey and give the right experience to the consumers. So that's for us what we term as SaaSification.
Okay, all right. So in a nutshell, then let's talk a little bit about the benefits that SaaSification does provide, and are we seeing, is that any different than like today during the pandemic than it would be at any other time?
Absolutely. In comparison to the other times, and as we call it a new beginning after the post-COVID world, in the prior world, one of the key benefits is the ability to realize phygital, which is a term which is being widely discussed in the industry, the convergence of physical and digital getting realized through a particular theme. And that is something which is accelerated because of COVID. So you have seen that in supply chains, especially in the e-commerce side, which is significantly accelerated, especially in the CPG and the retail segment, where people have really accelerated. We have seen platforms grow very rapidly there. And these are some of the areas where a combination of physical, combination of internet technologies, and combination of the last mile, how all those steps and some of those manual elements were taken out, and certain processes which had heavy human element in order to render an end-to-end service, how that can be transformed and morphed is another thing which is accelerated under COVID theme. We have seen it in learning and education. We have seen it in media and entertainment. We have seen it in retail supply chains, including CPG and distribution. So across the board, there are many other themes, but these are the key ones I thought I'll highlight.
Okay. All right. So, I think a lot of organizations in their rush to the cloud or in their rush to help their employees get set up for work from home, I worry that maybe there are certain organizations that maybe have moved a little too quickly and didn't think things out. So are there certain considerations that organizations really need to keep in mind when they are making this move to SaaSification or SaaSified environments, if you will?
Absolutely. Great point. And one of the key things as people have accelerated the journey to offer the capability to render services from anytime and anywhere. And that has led to the work from home adoption in a big way. TCS itself has started on something called as Secure Borderless Workspaces, which is also acronym called as SBWS. Significantly successful, in which we have rolled it out for our own customers. One of the key things, as you said, what's the pace of acceleration? The more important point there is contextualization for the type of service delivery. There are services that are requiring active collaboration between developer community, where you are conceptualizing and designing products. There are areas which are very sensitive in terms of SLAs for customer-related service operations. Each of those have different elements about the whole bundle of work from home, because it is not about accessing from a particular device and a wireless configuration. It is about the redundancies. It is about the uninterrupted power backups. It is about the ability to guarantee what is the most fundamental building block here, which is cybersecurity. So embedded cybersecurity end to end because currently either through VPN or without VPN, now the onus is to ensure cybersecurity across the board, not just within your perimeter. So the dissolution of the perimeter, which is being discussed very rapidly, which was happening before the COVID because of the cloud acceleration, it is one of the critical factors to putting the right design strategy about the whole embedded cybersecurity in all your business processes. So in summarization, type of service delivery, the whole element around embedded cybersecurity, and also maintaining customer experience. And the final most important element, which is employee emotional elements, and also more importantly, it's a major shift for employees who are major stakeholder in this whole activity. How does that emotional quotient, how does the emotional well-being, ability to motivate them in a longer stretch of time? First 2-3 weeks, people drive, productivity goes up based on a specific need to keep the adrenaline rushing, everything is happening there. How do you maintain sustainability in the productivity by keeping the employee connect? So the HCM angle, the human resources and the human capital management angle is extremely critical. In fact, they have a human capital management teams have much more active role in a work from home context. That's a very, very critical element. So all these are key ingredients.
That's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about the whole human capital element. Because you think about the customer experience, you think about the back end, the operations, the infrastructure. But yeah, the people equation, I guess, is not just the customers, but those who are working on it. Really, really critical. So that's really, really fascinating, actually. So are there certain environments where this whole idea of SaaSification just doesn't fly? It just doesn't work. I mean, it's for whatever reason, it just would not be as effective a model as the traditional kind of maybe on-premises model, or just a model that just seems to work better than SaaSification would.
Okay, this is a more profound question. The answer is it's like water finding its level. I think the acceleration of SaaSification will continue. It is not going to really decrease. What is more important is we should not substitute the ability of combining business process, human consulting, advisory capability with internet data enabled sources, with analytics, and then the final step around cloud. All of those combinations are building blocks for SaaSification. But in order to substitute that and say that replace all of this with a different model, one piece that I would say is critical, which is going to be there forever, is the human intervention in terms of feedback loop, advisory, specific the nuances about what is working and what is not working, and continuously fine-tuning the offerings. But on-premise based models without continuous innovation about offering them in an agile fashion is a dangerous thing for any business. You can really look at it from an e-commerce standpoint today. All of the companies today, and that is why emergence of Shopify has been significant. Emergence of Etsy has been very significant in these times. While there are additional, all the known players that are there in the business, some of these players which are enabling this whole angle is very critical. But did the last mile pick up from store, warehouse operations go away? No, they didn't go away. They are still there. So some of those critical elements about where does the human angle play a critical role needs to be continuously refreshed in terms of our service operations.
All right. Well, Spandan, thank you so much for taking the time talking with me about this really, really fascinating stuff. And I know, obviously as this rush to digital transformation continues to accelerate, I'm sure that this is a conversation I'm sure we'll be having again in the future. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Charlene, for the time and the opportunity. Looking forward to connecting with you again.
Excellent. All right, everybody, please stay tuned. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stick around.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops. I'm here now with Dominic Williams, who's a President and Chief Scientist at a company called Dfinity, or is it a foundation? Which It's a foundation. It's a not-for-profit. Yeah. That's right. Okay. All right, great. So thanks so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me today. Tell me a little bit about Dfinity. What are you guys on about?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. Dfinity is a foundation that is building something called the Internet Computer, which will be formed by an open protocol called ICP, Internet Computer Protocol, and effectively aims to extend the Internet so that in addition to providing connectivity, it also provides a shared computer.
Okay. All right. So that sounds an awful lot like the shared computer model of years ago with the big mainframe computers and the early days of the internet, and a lot of the research universities and other research institutions would kind of, connect their internet. I guess that was the early days of the internet. Huh? So tell me about the internet computer then. I mean, what do you guys really hope to do with it, and how is it so different than the current model of the internet?
So it's decentralized, and although logically it's a single shared computer a single shared public computer that everyone can build on. It's actually created by these things called node machines run at independent data centers around the world. So eventually, as more and more people build on this thing, there could be millions of these nodes running across thousands of data centers worldwide supporting it.
So what is the purpose behind this then? What do you guys hope to achieve with this new model?
Well, it's a very ambitious project. It sort of pushes into all kinds of areas of advanced computer science. And the purpose is to really reinvent how we build everything, how we build websites, enterprise systems, internet services, financial systems, the whole lot. And we've actually sort of reimagined software. And we want people to build on the internet rather than on the sort of closed proprietary and legacy stack. So developers building on the internet computer literally just write code and push it to the internet. So it's a completely different model. You don't need anything else. You don't need Amazon Web Services, cloud account. You don't need a content distribution network. You don't need a firewall to protect things. You don't need traditional legacy building blocks like databases and web servers because of the way the sort of environment works. So it's a complete rethink of how we build things. We want people to build directly on the internet. It addresses captive customer games because, today we build using a proprietary stack and all these different traditional building blocks. It's very easy to get locked in, even with open source systems. So it sort of simplifies things enormously and creates this sort of universal, seamless universe into which software can be uploaded. If let's say, it basically hosts these interoperable compute units called canisters. Mm-hmm. And let's say you wrote a canister in Rust, and uploaded it to the internet computer. If you shared some of your functions with me, I could write some canisters in a new language like Motoko, say, upload it to the internet computer, and it could directly call your functions. So it's a bit like, it's a massive simplification. It's a bit like the internet itself. On the internet, if I want to connect to some running software, I only have to know the IP address of the computer it's running on and the port it's listening on. On the internet computer, to call a function, you just need to know the identity of the canister and the signature of the function. So, the canister ID is the equivalent of an IP address, and the function signature is the equivalent of a port. So, you can create private systems on the internet computer, or you can create public systems. You can create just a basic website, or you can create a hyperscale internet service that has billions of users. So one of the things, the internet computer does is solve the sort of security issues that come with a legacy stack. Today we build these things that resemble Rube Goldberg machines, and they start off insecure, right? And so then we have to sort of surround them with firewalls and configure them and patch them and administer them to try and keep them secure. On the internet computer, the environment's tamper-proof. So you don't need a firewall or anything like that. You just upload your canisters into this environment, and there's no back doors. But it's also addressing, other key issues. I mean, one of them, as I mentioned, is just the complexity of the systems we build with the legacy stack. And we do things like orthogonal persistence. So today, when you want to persist data, you have to sort of marshal it in and out of a database or a file. On the internet computer, you just write code and persistence happens automatically, because the internet computer is actually persisting the memory pages the code runs in. So a canister is just a bundle of WebAssembly bytecode and the memory pages it runs in. And it's a kind of actor, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like it also reduces the amount of code that has to be written to make an application run. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and particularly for something like a hyperscale internet service,
right.
If you look, behind the scenes, things like, services like Facebook are actually very, very complex. The internet computer makes it vastly simpler to build hyperscale internet service architectures, and that's actually one of its purposes too.
Okay, so from a business perspective, how would an organization use the internet computer? I mean, what are some of the instances where maybe they would want to write an application for the internet computer that that is separate from perhaps their legacy applications or the software that they've created previously?
We've spoken to a lot of corporations and government organizations, and they tend to be most focused on having the opportunity to build something that's secure. So security is their primary concern at the moment. However, when you talk to them more, they also realize that, they're just meat in the sausage machine, right? And they sort of realize that they're meat in the sausage machine, and they realize, they're using all these different proprietary stack vendors, and that they're all trying to make them a captive customer, but they don't really understand the nature of the beast and how to escape. But they care about it. They want to be free. They'd far rather build on the internet rather than this legacy stack. And they're also bedeviled by complexity. If you look at the breakdown of costs in the corporate environment, like a Fortune 500 company, 85% is actually IT operations. And if you drill down into that, like 90% of the time spent by IT operations, 90% plus, is actually spent just addressing complexity. It's addressing the how, not the what. The internet computer tries to remove as much of the how as possible. Okay. Even for example, down to persistence. It's persisting the memory pages the software runs in. So, you don't think about persistence. It happens automatically. The persistence is orthogonal.
Excellent. So, is this a type of framework, if you will, that possibly would be suitable for low code or no code application development, or is this something altogether different?
I mean, people could build whatever they liked on top. So, I'm sure we'll see sort of low code, no code stacks being built on top of the internet computer. It's certainly true that you can even just out of the box, you can dramatically simplify things. So actually, the co-designer of WebAssembly works at the Dfinity Foundation, and he leads a languages team, and we've created a new language called Motoko. So, and this is designed specifically for the internet computer environment, although you can, create canisters in other languages like Rust, which also have their advantages. But as a developer, you can just code something up in something like Motoko or Rust, and upload this canister to the internet computer. And the internet computer, if you've shared functions, will actually create an interface to those functions for you. So you can, test those, type in the URL of the canister into a browser, and then interact with the canister's function without actually creating a user experience yourself. So it's even possible to create, as long as you're not too focused on the design and the graphics, it's even possible to quickly knock up a system just by writing a canister and defining some functions without even creating a user experience. But if you need to create a user experience, a canister can serve a user experience directly from the internet computer into a browser.
Okay. All right. Interesting. So you guys created is it like an alternative to TikTok, I hear, called CanCan?
Yeah. So yeah, that's right. So so we've got we're on a sort of public release schedule now, and I think one of the first sample apps we created was called Linked Up, and it was a social network of professional profiles. And we did that, of course, because LinkedIn revoked everyone's API access. There was this idea sort of going back a few years of the programmable web, and we'd all be able to sort of compose our services and riff off each other.
Right.
And the trouble is, big tech realized it was monopolistic strategy played better if you just sort of hijacked all the data and user relationships. So LinkedIn revoked everyone's API access. Thousands of startups were poleaxed. So Linked Up anyway showed how you can create an open internet service on the internet computer that uses special platform features that enable it to you to share APIs in a non-revocable way. So, for example, with Linked Up, you can create an API like get professional profile, and then any other project that needs professional profiles can build on top of that API without fear the API is going to be revoked later on. And this enables something called service composability, and we think it's key to the future of the internet because it creates an open sort of market, an open permissionless space in the same way that the internet did originally, except with computation. So we showed that was, we did Linked Up to show how people can create open internet services with APIs that can't be revoked. CanCan is actually timely. We had no idea all this controversy would pick up around TikTok, but the original purpose of CanCan was to demonstrate how you can build scalable architectures on the internet computer that can handle the vast quantities of user data involved in something like TikTok or YouTube. Because wherever you have user data, I mean Instagram to a lesser degree, users are uploading just vast quantities of data. And you have to be able to handle that. You have to have a very high write throughput in your service architecture. And of course, you need to be able to stream video and things like that. So in our case, this time, the CanCan is, I think there's a web version, but the one I've seen so far is just on an iPhone. So we wanted to show how we can just create the back end for iPhone apps too.
Very, very cool. Very cool. Well, Don, thanks so much for walking me through this. I'm really, really fascinated by this idea, and would be really, really interested in seeing how well this catches on, especially in the DevOps space and in software development in general. So thank you very much for sharing your insight and your information. And I'm sure we'll be circling back another time for another conversation to get back up to speed on the internet computer.
Thank you for having me.
All right, great. Okay, everybody, please stay tuned. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stick around. Hey, in the interview you just saw there with Dominic Williams of the Internet Computer, he mentioned an open source app called CanCan, which is an open source version of TikTok. And I thought it might be kind of cool if they actually showed us a demo of the app at work. So without further ado, here is a pre-recorded demo, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.
Hi, it's Stanley again. I've been watching some silly dancing cat videos streaming straight from the Internet Computer on the latest example app from Dfinity Developer Experience Team. We call it CanCan. Let's take a deeper look at how it works. So last fall we launched the Motoko programming language and our SDK. And at the time I showed you a very simple to-do app. It ran in the terminal on my laptop. And then this spring we launched a test network. So I showed you a desktop web app that ran in a single data center. CanCan is a mobile video sharing app distributed across multiple data centers. So 6 months ago, we were showing you the 1970s era computing, and now we're already up to the 20-teens, which puts us on pace to hit the year 2050 by this winter. Our last app, Linked Up, was composed of multiple stateful modules, or canisters. And one served the front-end assets and the API. The other handled social graph behavior. There was no database because all of the data was persisted by declaring standard data structures like arrays, maps, trees. For CanCan, we again have multiple canisters working together. This time, the first canister is only serving the front-end assets, which we've written in TypeScript using the React framework. But you could use Vue or Angular or even no framework at all. Connecting to other canisters is even simpler than a standard XHR. You import the canister by its alias, which the SDK can resolve at build time, and then you can call any of the public methods of your canister in your code. The second canister is holding all of our data. It's sort of a distributed hash table that we've implemented in Motoko. And not just the metadata and content hashes are stored here, but the video bytes themselves, and then we are sliced into chunks and stored. To be retrieved, reconstituted, and then played as a video in the front end. So we can request a video, and the back end will either respond with data, or it will request the data from one of its peers. And that ability to shard and rebalance means that my storage scales as needed, so I'll never run out of space. Now, Dominic challenged us to build a library like this one, which we call BigMap, so that developers could write a scalable app in less than 1,000 lines of code. Actually, he said 500 lines of code, but we talked them up to 1,000. For CanCan, we did it in 0. There's no other backend than this library. BigMap has a simple interface, put and get, and that's all we ended up needing in the front end. The scaling happens painlessly and out of sight. In fact, if you kept the same interface, you could swap the implementation for a canister written in an entirely different language, which is what we did. The Rust implementation takes advantage of non-mutating queries, which are blazing fast on the Internet Computer. So we make one lookup to an index canister and then another query to a data canister with the canister that the first result responds with. Now these queries resolve in milliseconds, so our first byte of data arrives in less than a second. Every service running on the Internet Computer is completely interoperable with every other, regardless of the language in which they were authored. So once your code has been compiled to a WebAssembly module and then installed as a tamper-proof canister, services can be seamlessly composed as easily as importing a library. Speaking of installing, I actually noticed a typo in our app earlier. So let's quickly fix it and update our canister. CanCan here should clearly be lowercase. If I make the change and rebuild the app, you'll see I get a few warnings because I'm using an unreleased version of the SDK. Now when I deploy, I can specify whether I want to reinstall with a fresh state or upgrade only the code while keeping the state intact. And now if I take a look at my phone, you can see that the change is live and in the hands of my users in just seconds. So I deployed changes across a decentralized network running in data centers all across the world, about as fast as I could tweet that Dfinity is hiring SDK engineers. Let's recap. Streaming video on mobile device written in multiple languages with painless scaling, updated in seconds. This goes beyond legacy software development, beyond smart contracts. This is app development in 2020. The network is live, applications are open, and I hope to see you soon. You'll excuse me, I need to go shoot some cans.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops. Happy Monday, July 6th. I hope everybody had a great weekend. If you're still celebrating the July 4th holiday, then as my neighbor on Long Island used to say, my God, good for you. But I am here today, not just to hope you have had a great weekend, but also to let you know of some of the webinars we have coming up this week. We have a great selection of webinars, but thought I'd point out a couple that are happening this week. Hopefully we can get you guys registered. Our first one is happening tomorrow at 1 p.m. And it's on DevOps.com. It's called Autonomous Incident and Root Cause Detection. This one focuses on machine learning and how it can be used to automate problem detection and root cause characterization. It's a bit on the technical side, but I think it's going to have lots of really great information that hopefully your organization can use in its software development and testing efforts. So tune in for that one. The next one is also happening on Tuesday. This one is happening also on DevOps.com, and it's at 3 p.m. And this one focuses on Kubernetes, and it's called Kubernetes, Reducing Infrastructure Cost and Complexity. And it takes a look at how organizations are being challenged by keeping Kubernetes workloads highly available, but keep their costs down. And it offers a couple suggestions and really provides some really great insight. So if your organization is using containers and Kubernetes, I recommend you take a look at this webinar, sign up for it. It's going to have some really great information. It's sponsored by Spot, which is, chock full of really smart people. So I would, again, definitely recommend this one if your organization is using containers and Kubernetes in highly available environments. The third one that I want to focus on today is happening on Wednesday, July 8th. It's at 1 p.m. This one is also on DevOps.com, and it's called Revolutionize Software Test Automation with AI. Now, Aaron Bakar, who was on a recent AI/ML Ops webinar that I hosted, it was a panel discussion, really good one, worth checking out also. But he's actually going to be the speaker for this one as well. And he's focusing on ways organizations could add speed and reliability to their continuous delivery pipeline. Also, really heavy-duty DevOps focused, but machine learning is always one of those really fascinating topics. So again, I would recommend this webinar for anybody who's looking to add that speed and that reliability into their continuous delivery pipeline, and maybe using ML, machine learning, to do that. So that's it. That's all that I got for you today. Tune in tomorrow and I'll have another selection of webinars for you to check out. Until then, please stay safe.
Thanks, Charlene. 2 strong interviews today. We appreciate it. Next up now, we have the first of our 2 Analyst Corner sessions today. This first one features Sanjeev Sharma, Principal Analyst at ASG, Accelerated Strategies Group. And we'll let Sanjeev tell you what he's going to talk about. Sanjeev, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to my session to Analyst Corner. My name is Sanjeev Sharma. I'm co-founder and principal analyst at Accelerated Strategies. If you've been following Analyst Corner before, usually it's my partner in crime, Mitch Ashley, standing in for him today. So what am I going to talk about today in Analyst Corner? Well, we at Accelerated Strategies recently concluded a survey on the current state of software delivery management. What is software delivery management? Well, it is this encompassing capability across process, tools, technology, organizational structures, and culture to measure how capable an organization is, or how much capacity an organization, capability an organization has to deliver software effectively and efficiently, which delivers the needs of the business. So we did a survey on the current state. So this report will be coming out soon. In fact, I'm writing it as we speak. I have the document open, which I'm editing for the findings and reports. So I thought in today's Analyst Corner, I'll give you a little bit of a preview, but I want to focus specifically on one area. Now, We are 10 years into the DevOps movement, right? I remember, that word DevOps started becoming popular 10 years, 8 years or so ago was when I got involved in DevOps in 2012 to start off with. And one of the goals of DevOps has always been to break down organizational silos, to break down functional silos in an organization, and to improve communication and collaboration across teams. Its communication and collaboration needs to happen in two ways, right? It has to be horizontal communication, where people across different functional areas in a software delivery pipeline are able to communicate and collaborate with each other and have visibility to the data they need in order to be able to do their jobs. And the data is not locked into functional silos. There is also communication that needs to happen vertically, right, across management chains, right? So are the practitioners able to get information from their leaders who are the decision makers? Are the decision makers able to get real information from the practitioner level so that they can make informed decisions which are data-driven? And also across application delivery pipelines, right? So in any organization, large organization, there'll be multiple software delivery pipelines which are interdependent on each other. And those, you end up getting as slow as the slowest delivery pipeline in which you're dependent upon. So these layers, these separation of silos, 10 years into DevOps still exist. And our survey found that, it validated that. No matter which way you look at it, across this separation of various functional, organizational, and structural silos, they exist today. Most of people who responded to our survey, more than 60%, said functional silos exist, and information is compartmentalized in these functional silos still. This is a problem, folks. We need to address this, right? Because we, as a practitioner, we need information which we need to have in order to do our jobs, and if that information is compartmentalized, or if we cannot communicate and collaborate with people in these functional silos, it is a challenge. We haven't solved the problem DevOps set out to solve. The other thing which was surprising is that the management layer of information still exists also. In fact, it's pretty bad. One of the things we found is that managers, senior, the higher up you go in the organization, and we went all the way up to C-level suite, all the from practitioners, the picture is rosier, right? The data people are giving us in the survey responses which say how good are things, how bad are things, with the questions we asked. The senior leadership seems to be having a much rosier picture. Now that can mean one of two things. Either they have real data, which is telling that at the broader sense, right, at the higher when you step back and look at how things have improved, they are actually better, but that information is not permeating down to the practitioners who look at their window through their aperture and say, things still are bad and there can be a lot of improvement there. That's one thesis. The second is that things are really bad, and that's the real data, and the management doesn't have visibility into it, right? And they are concluding, they're getting sanitized version of the data, which gives them the conclusion that things are better. Either scenario is bad, and we haven't investigated enough to look at these scenarios, to look at what's happening, to say which one of those scenarios is true. We can only draw conclusions based on the symptoms. But both scenarios are bad. Whether the information, basically it tells us the information is not flowing vertically. And things get really, really bad when you start looking across application delivery pipelines, because now you have software sprawl, right? You have multiple technology stacks which are not integrated. There is no metadata which can be correlated across those technology stacks effectively to make data-driven decisions. So these are this is a preview of the findings you'll be seeing. So stay tuned. More details of this report will be coming out. I need to get back to writing the report so that we can publish it. And this report, like everything we publish at Accelerated Strategy, is going to be freely available, right? You go to our website, there'll be a landing page where you'll be getting the state of software delivery management report. This has been underwritten by our partners, CloudBees, but this is an independent study which we conducted. So come back and check it out, and stay tuned. Follow us on Twitter and on social media, and keep a lookout for the announcement for when we publish the report. So with that, that's me signing off. Thank you for your time.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right. Thanks much, Sanjeev. All right. And for our second Analyst Corner with Mitch today, we really have the real Mitch. Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder at Accelerated Strategies Group. Mitchell, what do you have?
Hi, it's Mitch Ashley with the Accelerated Strategies Group. I'm joined by two of my colleagues, friends, people that we work together in many different ways. First is Bob Bresselman, who's an analyst with ASG also. Welcome, Bob. And also Don Lutz, who is a coworker, advisor, does some analyst work with the Accelerated Strategies Group, as well as other development projects. So, guys, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, great to be here. Good. I'm excited to talk with you both because you're both super interesting guys to talk to normally, and getting us all together is even more fun. So we wanted to talk about Dapper, and it's emerged, getting a lot of interest, some excitement, some questions about it, what it is, how to use it, why do I have it, et cetera. And I think we're going to delve into some of those issues today. While it's not developer level stuff, I think it'll help all of us kind of understand different perspectives on why Dapper, why not Dapper, where we go with it. So Don, do you mind kind of giving us, this isn't a tutorial, but give enough of an explanation so people know what Dapper is.
Sure. It stands for Distributed Application Runtime. So it really came out of two gentlemen who worked in the Azure CTO office that were intrigued by the problem when you're starting to build asynchronous messaging, microservices, plugging to Kubernetes, service mesh. There's a lot of complexity to that problem. So if you could create a runtime framework that would make that simpler, so you could build your services, they could work with Python, Go, C#, JavaScript, and deal with things like discovering services, figuring out where your various data stores are and how to talk to them, plug in actors because you need the ability to deal with stateful microservices. It was to create kind of a super subset of all the features to do cloud native across the board. I mean, at a high level nutshell, that's it. There are a lot of details, but you can kind of view it as that. And it happens at a runtime level, not at a framework level.
That's what I was going to ask you, is like compare that to a framework, because it's not a framework if you're talking runtime.
No, I mean, it has elements. It requires Docker. So the whole idea is whether you run it locally or with Kubernetes, there's a pattern called a sidecar pattern, and you run the other pod and you talk to that, and that is where the Dapper stuff lives. So you can easily connect all those things, do open telemetry and all of those values. So you don't have the problem of frameworks.
Mm-hmm.
So just to help me understand a little bit more, Don, so is Dapper multi-cluster? I mean, can I run it across multiple Kubernetes clusters?
You can. There's some effort in it, but you can do it.
Right. So the bigger one is just, here's your cluster, and instead of having to, control it through a service mesh or something, we can just point Dapper to it, and our life gets easier. Is that an accurate assessment?
That's an accurate assessment. Originally, they called it Dapper with a K because it was, Kubernetes and reactive. So if you could deal with events and you could deal with Kubernetes, then you start playing into that whole choreography orchestration concept.
Okay. So I have another question. So you spend time with this, so I'm going to defer to your expertise always and forever. But what's the learning curve?
I thought it was relatively easy. I found some of the developers that I did it originally with had trouble just because it requires they have sort of some DevOps mindsets, thinking about, okay, where are things, how to discover my services, and they're like, oh, well, I could talk to Kafka. I said, or you could use what's in Dapper to talk to it. They kind of, they have to think systemically. It requires you to think about distributed systems, which is why Dapper got written. Distributed systems sometimes are the bane of developers because you have to think about things like eventual consistency, all those kind of asynchronous concepts, which sometimes throw people for loops.
So is it fair to say it's a one ring to rule them all solution?
Conceptually, yes.
So it's a way of life.
It could be, but I don't want to say that.
That's a pretty evil ring you're referring to there.
Let's go back here. So it's a one ring solution published or sponsored by Microsoft.
yeah, but it's because of their open source focus. It kind of has a different. I mean, they were trying to solve a real problem. They were concerned that. I mean, I know it sort of has that vibe, but it's you can go multiple ways. I kind of enjoy it because it creates a nice, abstraction around some things that are handy to have,
such as.
Being able to talk to Redis versus Kafka, figuring out where resources are, building, traditionally when you build actors, I've built a lot of actors over the years. There's akka, there's so many different actor frameworks. And the problem is microservices are horrible at state because you have too many components. And if you have an actor, it's a single threaded thing. So then you really know how to do that. And you can build stateful things that don't cause other problems.
Right. So let me just elaborate for a minute so we're all on the same page here. When you say a microservice has trouble with state, can you give me an example?
Well, just if you get if you get your traditional microservice, even if it just talks to one database, you're actually putting that data in there, and if you ever shared it, anything, it causes a problem. And you have to make sure you have all those things. You have to have the immutability and the calls and all that. Where if you have an actor, it really is this single-threaded thing that controls all the access to the outbox, so you don't have all those problems. The lock happens in the actor, not at the lower level of the data.
Is that because the functions are broken across different microservices, so they aren't all kind of pulled together into one?
But it's truly because it's really just single-threaded. The whole idea of an actor is, it just spins in a loop. It's not Node, but the whole idea, it is the thing that controls that access. That's why, there's a whole bunch of different actor frameworks out there. But you have to integrate them in. It's not always the easiest thing to do.
Okay, so let's be a little concrete here, because this is an interesting discussion before we get to the more, what can we say, policy work. So can you give me an example of where Dapper is just a really good solution? Can you say, here's the problem, and here's how Dapper really addresses it? As concrete as you can in 30 seconds. There you go.
Okay, well, I found it really handy. At Faction, we used it because I thought it was super interesting to deal with the fact that you could have C# or Go or Python, build up those microservices, make all those connections, and handle that correctly. You could have the SDK for each system very well and handle it without having to kind of you can do that with microservices, but it gives you a lot more plumbing to make it work better.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, that's good. Okay.
I was trying to do 30 seconds, so I was trying to figure out.
Yeah, you did 30 seconds. Yeah, so I'm just imagining. Let's go, but let's get a little more concrete. So let's say I have a really a microservice-oriented application, and let's say it's really simple. It just creates. I have one service that does nothing but emit fortune cookie strings. Right, here's a fortune. Right, be kind to your dog and all that stuff. And then I have another microservice that can take that fortune and it can schedule it to be emitted to at a given period. That's a second microservice. And then I have a third microservice that can pick up, let's say, a message or through an HTTP connection directly, and given a target, have the ability to send that fortune, right, be kind to your dog, to a given target. How does Dapper adapt, or how does Dapper encapsulate all of those microservices into a single, not context, but a single organization?
Yeah, it would, you could put it in a pod, so to speak. Right. You'd build it in your pod, and you'd actually, Dapper enables both gRPC and HTTP. So you create your pod, and you could actually use the pub sub for the fortune cookie part. You then could use all the service discovery stuff so they all could find each other without much complexity. And then you could figure out the right way to scale it there in a simpler way.
Right. Because under Kubernetes, what we'd have to do is we'd have to create a service and do all that service discovery orchestration, right, in the in the service manifests, right? And Dapper does away with that.
It handles it in the framework. It does it very, very well.
Okay.
You're kind of picking your poison. Do you want to do it all by hand, or you want to default it to a runtime framework that might not give you the granularity that you might want? So there are trade-offs there.
Right. But it sounds like it's a good solution then for, again, it's almost like Service Mesh Lite. I don't need to go deep into the weeds to do a whole boatload of configuration. I can put my services out there as in Kubernetes, as each service A goes to pod A, service B goes to pod B, service C goes to pod C, and I can rely upon Dapper to handle the orchestration interaction between them. Is that accurate?
Correct. That's accurate, because I could say, okay, let's add a new pub sub that sends it off to service 4 over here and add that in.
Right. So then as a developer, I can go back to the fundamentals of microservice development and programming. Is I should only be concerned with my context. I should never be concerned with anybody else's context.
Correct.
If I'm writing the fortune cookie, all I need is my fortune cookie is my world. And as long as I can make sure that my fortune cookie service meets the SLA I'm publishing, my world is cool. Is that
correct? Correct.
Okay, that sounds great. So now, so we have this thing now called Dapper, and it, Service Mesh Lite, and when we talk about learning curve, Lily, when you sat down from day one, when you sat down and you learned Dapper, spelled DAPR, and to where you actually had to become functional with it, how much time did that really take?
A couple days. I kind of messed around because I was trying to figure out, I wanted to try a bunch of different things. I built something in Go, then I did something in C#, spun up some messaging, looked at the service discovery. Okay, let's see, let's map it to a local process. Okay, let's map it. One, you have to have Docker. So everybody has to, familiarity with Docker is like fundamental. If Docker is not in, you can't do it without Docker. So container concepts have to be inherent to the people doing it.
And do you have to use Docker, or can you use an alternative container?
Docker is the way it's done right now. That's the way that
doesn't support Container D or?
No, it's Docker right now because they picked that as a default thing. It doesn't mean that couldn't happen. There's a lot, it's a very active repository where people are open, adding things all the time. Right,
but it is right. So you are buying Docker.
You're buying Docker. They picked that.
Right. It's interesting because there is a movement now in the industry to move away from Docker. Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. So, there are other ones. You see the different ones that are popping out. And that could be driven by the fact that Docker tried to do the enterprise and they sold it to Mirantis and they had no idea. What they were doing at that level, which caused a lot of consternation.
Right. So is this geeky enough for you yet, Mitch?
I'm enjoying it. It's like a tennis match. I'm just waiting for the ball to out of bounds. So you guys are doing great.
Right. So now, okay, so let's go. So we got to do the framework. So here's the reality. You're an expert developer. You have a boatload of experience. So 2 days in downtime might be, if we had to take, not an entry level, but a developer would say 2 years experience and is just getting used to Microsoft. It might take maybe a week and a half.
Yeah, I would think that's about accurate.
Okay, so good. So I'm a development manager, and some guy sends me an email, say, look, you got to look at this Dapper stuff. It's going to solve a boatload of problems. And immediately the guy says, what's it going to cost me to adopt this, given my staff, right? And so already they're looking at a week and a half of just play time. And that's all right. I mean, we got to do that with anything. So, but the benefit is, what I'm hearing you say is the benefit is that we don't have to struggle with the complexities of something like Istio.
Yes.
Which is a significant service mesh technology, or Azure Service Mesh, or any of the...
Linkerd, you name it, they're all a puzzle in a lot of ways.
Terribly complex. Right. And so the pro is Service Mesh Lite. It's polyglot, so I can write in Go, Node, Dino, if anybody ever decides to adopt Dino. Whatever. It'd be interesting if I could write to mainframe COBOL interfaces.
There was actually one of the guys, I should send the article, mapped it to COBOL. One of the guys who worked with the CTO at Microsoft did make it work with COBOL for whatever reason. Right. I don't even know why.
Running against mainframe installations.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big deal. It is really big. Yeah, because 80% of the world's data, corporate data, is still on a mainframe. Right. So this is sounding encouraging. So I drink the Kool-Aid, and now what are my gotchas?
Gotchas, I think the big gotcha is Docker. You have to have bought off on the idea that you're going to have to use the sidecar pattern because they adopted that is the core, container pattern that they adopted. Even if it's a process, it's still a sidecar. You're running your pods here and the other pods over here, and you're putting your Dapper stuff there and your stuff is over here. So those are the gotchas. You have to play by those rules, and you're, if you're going to do like open telemetry, it needs to be in the Dapper one. You have Kubernetes operators in there. You can't mix it into, got a really cool framework idea that you want to mix into your microservice that might cause an issue with having that with the other pod that is Dapper.
Right. So now it says that just the way some places say we're a Java shop, we're a .NET shop, we're a Python shop. Now some places are going to have to advertise themselves as we're a Dapper shop. We're a Dapper shop. There is no choice here. Right.
Don, is there a coexistence with existing frameworks like you talked about Istio or others, or is this no? It sounds like you're going to have to go Dapper if you're Dapper. You're not. Sharing.
I mean, you could probably make it work because fundamentally is with Istio, as long as you suppose an ingress point, you could have the two talk together. That isn't a problem. You're just saying that.
Are you talking from scratch apps, or can you apply it to an existing?
You might be able to apply it. I haven't really looked at that. I'm not. I don't see that it's impossible. I just don't want to say it's awesome because it probably requires some serious exploration and some good things to figure out how not to screw up all that sort of horizon routing crap that could break. And then you're
proceed with caution.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And at the end of this, we'll put this. There is a dapper.org or something. Is there?
Dapper.io and something else.
APR.io. Yeah, we'll put up a little thing on the screen so people can go there. Yeah, I've looked at it. It's a compelling technology. There's no question about it.
Are there certain areas that either Bob you see that this would be very adaptable to, or Don you're seeing it being adopted so far? Who's looking for this problem to be solved?
I view it's multi-cloud people and people that want to build a lot of microservices. Because if you look at companies like Netflix, they built a lot of internal technology to solve this because they had to deal with it, and that's where then Kubernetes came up. But Kubernetes is at such a low level of a DevOps level that it isn't always the programmers don't just jump into DevOps and go, let's go swimming in these DevOps tool chains because I don't really love them.
Yeah, and the important thing to point out here, which is sort of my battle cry, is there's a real risk here of the concept of microservices becoming a bright, shiny thing. Because everybody wants to be cool. I mean, that's just the way it is. It almost goes back to, there was a joke back in 2000 when multimedia was the big thing, is that we were going to actually do an IPO around multimedia toasters, right? It didn't matter, just the toaster was going to pop up, but we were going to call it a multimedia toaster, and we were just going to make a boatload of money on it. Fortunately, neither the toaster nor the IPO happened. But on the other hand, people they think this thing called microservices, oh, great. Everybody's got to jump on board to be cool and current and be able to hire into that talent pool. But we need to point out that microservices aren't for everybody. And the litmus I use is, and please, Don, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm saying, look, if you have under 100,000 users and you have low revision cycles, if your revision cycle is on the order of 30 days or even 14 days, and you have a monolithic application that's working for you and you can revise that monolithic application pretty reliably at a given cadence, like you got to be prepared, man. Microservices are going to cost you a boatload of money. And you better make sure that that investment is worth the benefit you're going to get, my opinion. But I see it happening over and over again. People just say, I got to have my microservices, and they completely underestimate the amount of work and support and plumbing that's required to make it work effectively. Now, if you're Facebook and you're supporting 100 million users and you have revision cycles that are hourly, now you're talking some big money and the trade-off becomes justifiable. But we need to be very clear about that.
I don't disagree. I mean, if you're not everyone needs microservices. It is the bright, shiny thing. It's just that if you're going to be deployed, when you reach that certain X, which is maybe it's 40, 100 microservices, you've got lots of bounded context, you have lots of asynchronous, all this other stuff, then these technologies make sense. But, if you and I were going to go make this toaster thing, and plug it into like an Xbox, we sure in hell don't need this stuff.
Right. And also there's a big difference too between green and brownfield. If somebody hired, we're going to go out and hire a team brand new. We haven't written a bit of code yet. And you're saying we're going to microservice the daylights out of it. Is the wisdom of a microservice architecture appropriate? Maybe yes, maybe no, but implementing it is going to be a boatload easier than going up to an existing code base and having to retrofit that guy to make it work. I mean, at what can I say? A significant layer, maybe 10x cost. But, some people want to do that. Go on.
Well, yeah, there are companies who want to do it. I mean, I've seen that when I did a thing at the microservices meetup, there were companies that talked to me afterwards who wanted to do microservices that didn't make any sense, but because they were so convinced it was the be all and the end all, they were going there and they didn't need to do it at all.
Right. And if you're right, so the thing is, you want to have fun. How about this? Do a simple asynchronous microservice, which means no HTTP. Everything is message driven. And you want to have fun, write your microservice, have your developers write the unit tests, but then do the integration tests around that. Have fun. Tell me how you're going to do tests in an asynchronous manner that are reliable and easy to maintain. Tell me that. And we'll say, oh, gee, I never thought about that. Well, that's your world.
Well, yeah, and they have to have accepted eventual consistency. When you start saying, okay, your order microservice is very consistent. When you go to get your customer, that may not be consistent at the same time. So you have to expect that not everything is, we don't have those ACID properties once you distribute things, ACID is all out of the plane.
Yep. Yeah, and you have to go back, learn your CAP theorem, my friends at home, learn your CAP theorem, consistency, availability, and partition. Those are words to live by. Anyway, how are we doing on time, Mitch?
We're doing real well. I'm thinking let's kind of turn this as a way to wrap up or kind of bring conclusion to this. I'm really curious where we are in the hype versus the adoption curve of this, right? You were talking about the hype. Really, we're talking about the hype of microservices and why do you need it? I mean, you're not going to go down. You're not going to go down the Dapper route unless you're doing microservices. Is that a correct assumption?
It's a correct assumption. I mean, I don't think you'd do it. It would be an interesting way to learn distributed programming without having to do all the plumbing. So that for a programmer, it's a good learning experience, regardless of for that, which is not relevant to the business.
Okay, so that kind of completes checkbox one. Second is, are you much better off starting with Dapper now that we have it, assuming that you buy whatever premises that you buy about adopting Dapper, versus kind of going current, I'll say old school, it's not old school, but current best practices without it? In other words, if you're starting greenfield, to your question, Bob, is it so obvious you would go out and at least look at Dapper as a way to get started, or is it sort of still in the experimental category, learning it, seeing what its best uses are?
The only reason I think it's not in the experimental category is O'Reilly's publishing a book in September. They got so much demand that they'll have a book done that they started in March and it'll be done in September. So that was an interesting fact that, they don't normally, it was relatively fast on their list to get a book out there. So it says something about it. I don't exactly know what, but it's interesting.
So maybe a road sign that says promising, wouldn't bet the farm on it quite yet.
Yeah.
Right. It'd be interesting to take a look at the download and contribution rate too. It's on GitHub, right?
Yeah, it's been pretty high. They had a pretty good push, because just writing distributed programming stuff sucks and nobody really wants to do it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, let's get that part right. Yeah, but on the other hand, it is a bright, shiny thing.
This is microservices. Well, I'm thinking about what you're describing of, as things get smaller so you can move faster, they get more complex too, which is what you're describing around microservices. And at some point it can get out of hand. Like you were talking, Bob, maybe I got to deliver, once every 14 days versus once every hour. That might be one threshold for looking at something like Dapper. Is there a size of the service mesh that you're trying to implement at some point? Managing this behemoth comes as its own set of problems like a monolith does. Is that sort of a threshold to look at Dapper?
It is, because you kind of because once you start doing microservices, frequently you have an API gateway for the public, and then you have a service mesh that's internal to your company, because that's a different, one's going east-west, one's going north-south. So you have to have a way to manage the services inside and then the services outside. So then you have to bring in other technologies. It's not as simple.
So things have gotten smaller, doing faster, got more complex, and that results in things like we need traceability for visibility into microservices. Does Dapper help with that at all?
Yeah, it builds it in. You actually can build a new open telemetry and all that's built in. But once again, that's not a freebie. If you don't come up with the correlation ID, which is normally a GUID that everything traces, then you have logs, but you can't figure out how they correlate to each other. You go, well, Bob's fortune cookie sent it off to the Chinese restaurant, but we can't figure out where it went after it went there.
Right.
Right.
It's still Microsoft services underneath all that. And
So to bring back, I mean, there are technologies out there that will provide traceability through the cluster. I'm thinking of VM's Wavefront, and Datadog does to some degree. So is there integration from those people into Dapper?
Datadog started looking at it. They're starting to see how they can. Splunk has made a few statements about what they want to do with it. I don't know whether what that means. It's something they said on LinkedIn, which could mean nothing. Or it could mean more.
Right. So supporting the correlation ID, which I can, I've written extensively about the correlation ID. It's a one little GUID that can change the whole way your business works. But a lot of people just still don't support it. But without that ability to trace requests through a distributed track asynchronously, you're flying blind. Right?
Yeah. And that's the thing that people who decide to do microservices, those things they don't even think about. They honestly, because they're like, oh, we just wrote some code and we published it with a framework. I'm like, well, how do you know how it's working? They're like, oh, we read the logs. Okay, how do you know that's working?
Well, the good news is, let me toot my own horn here. The last project I architected, the correlation ID was built in. Nothing went out that couldn't be traced. There you go. That was a rule. Nice.
Start from a good place. Yeah. But go ahead, Bob.
I just want to put in a plug for the correlation ID. It's a 10-second concept. The correlation ID says this: when you get a request, you look in the HTTP header, and there is a field, a header field called X correlation-ID. If it's there, you take that GUID, which is attached to the correlation ID, and if you make a response, you pass that GUID on. If it's not there, what you do is you add it and then pass it on, because the agreement is that the downstream people is they're going to look for that correlation ID and they're going to pass it on if it's there. If not, they'll create their own. However, that's conventional. It's not systemic. What you really need is a framework that will do it for you automatically, very much like a site. That's something you just inject into the cluster that will make everything observable. But some people do and some people don't.
It's at that kind of social contract level. We agree to do it, or
Right. But as Don says, if wishes were horses, beggars were doves. Do something. I don't know.
So one thing to give you a forewarning here, Bob, I'd like your opinion about this. Don's a little farther down the curve of working with Dapper and hands-on with the learning, et cetera. As you assess it, I'm not asking you to make any grand predictions that we know, good chance we'll always be wrong on those things. But what's your assessment of Dapper? I mean, why would you find it interesting? Why would you look at it? How closely would you follow it? Is this?
I pay attention. I pay attention. First of all, you can't. Microsoft has done a good job over the last 5 years of playing well with the kids. Okay, Microsoft has sort of gone out of the business of trying to, what was it called? Extend and exterminate, right? And that used to be their mantra. That really was. And that's one of the reasons I just couldn't do it anymore. But once the leadership changed and the current CEO came in and they're saying, look, we got to learn to play. We got to learn to play well. It's not to saying they're saying they're not focused on profitability and they're not focused on market share, but they're focused on it in a different way. So the fact that they're sponsoring this thing called Dapper and they're addressing a real problem. I mean, for any of us that have gone down the route of having to support service discovery, how do I make it so that I can do a whole lot of switch and change behind the scenes and still not affect how things are represented to the public, right? That fundamental problem, which is there when you're dealing with high revision, fast change environments, it's critical. And service discovery companies have built their wherewithal around service discovery. HashiCorp comes to mind. Kubernetes has internal service discovery built right in. So the fact that they're going to start addressing that in a technology, which is what Don says, 2 days for an expert programmer is nothing. right? Whereas adopting a technology such as Console or even Envoy can take a week, 2 weeks, maybe even a month just to get it down. So this is important. This is important. What we need to be aware of is the notion of what can I say, the single technology lock. That's real. But there's always a lock at some level, right? I mean, there is. You just can't get away from it. But we can minimize it. And as an executive, what I would be saying, okay, look, you're really asking me to do a way of life. I want to make sure this way of life has legs, that it's going to be around for a long time, that I can hire people into it. And if I can't hire those people, can I at least get them productive in a short amount of time? And Dapper's checking off all those boxes. And their developer experience is good. It's good. When I farted, excuse the expression, I played around with it, but I wasn't like, what's going on here? I don't get it. Right. And I've had technologies where that happens. Mm-hmm. And this one is, okay, cool. Is there a lot more to learn? Yes. Is it effective? Yes. Will it solve a very big problem with little pain? Yeah, it seems to. So I'd be paying attention.
It seems like if it checks the boxes and it's solving a real problem, trying to make the complexity less complex or manageable.
Right. The real problem.
That's an interesting space to be in.
Yeah.
So let's wrap things up just with some resources. One or both of you mentioned the site dapr.io, Dapper.io is one resource. Are there others to look at for more? I mean, obviously there's GitHub and things like that.
There are a lot of articles where people have built example programs in C# and Node, and there's quite a few different things out there. NewStack did a whole thing about why Dapper is important, just a high level. You're starting to see people publish things, attempting things, But it's all out there. You can look at the code. You can do whatever you want. You just have to decide what level you want to go to. Or you just download the SDK and just use it and don't even think about it.
Yeah, and I'm a YouTuber, so I found a lot of stuff on YouTube for it also, with references back to code. So yeah, it's there. It's not cryptic by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay, good. I'm trying to think. There was something else I was going to ask about resource. You were talking about the whole traceability issue and how to write code properly. Or there's some good suggested resources for that, Bob?
Oh.
You'd written about.
Oh, jeepers. I don't know. Give me a call. The call, I mean, I don't know if Don's taking calls these days, but right. Fix my code for free, right?
Yeah, send your code samples to.
Right. Allow me to come to your house and make you dinner after I'm through fixing your code for free. Yeah.
Looking forward to that email.
Yeah, but no, send me an email. I can send stuff on. Send us an email. Yeah. There's a lot out there. It's not something you can do in 5 seconds.
Okay.
No, it's not instantaneous. If it was, everybody would be doing it.
Yeah.
So wrapping last reference to look up, you're wearing your robotics t-shirt, Don. So I have to give you opportunity to promote FIRST. I know that's a passion of yours.
I'll just do a high level, FIRST is, a worldwide robotics program. It's all over the world. It's got programs from, Junior Lego League, FTC, FRC. So, there's, lots of kids who do it. It's been around for 30 years. It was founded by Dean Kamen. You can look up FIRST on the web and learn all about it, and there's always mentoring. Anybody who's super technical or has business knowledge can help kids, and it's a great organization.
Something you both share is helping other people learn about technology. So great thing, great attribute and thing to contribute back. Thanks, guys. Good conversation. Enjoyed it very much. I enjoyed watching the tennis match. We'll see you next time.
Okay.
Thanks. Have a great day.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Okay, good stuff from Mitchell and Sanjeev as well as Charlene. I hope you enjoyed all we put together for you today. I think we had some great interviews, some great content. We'll be back live tomorrow, and we do have some, as I mentioned, some announcements for tomorrow. But until then, that's going to call a wrap on today, Monday. Stay safe, stay well, stay strong. TechStrong. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.